Alright guys, I'd like to welcome you to my Season 10 Ultimate Akali Guide. And for those of you that don't know who I am a formerly Challenger Akali main with over 10,000 games with her, and I've been maining her for literally 10 years now since she was released. I'm here to help you become the greatest Akali main you can be, style with amazing outplay potential, and carry every single game you play. By the end of this video, you should be able to have all the resources to become at least a Diamond Akali main and start climbing from wherever you are, whether it be Iron, Gold, or whatever. You should have all the tools to climb. There's going to be timestamps throughout this video of each section, and at the end there will be a counter guide, little tips and tricks against every single matchup in League of Legends, so you can refer back to it whenever you're playing games as Akali. But for now, let's get into the guide. So starting off, I want to mention why you should play Akali, because there are literally tons of good reasons. For one, she has the highest potential to solo carry in League of Legends, period. And when I say solo carry, I mean the rest of your team either goes even or just feeds in general. She's also capable of carrying in ways that most champions simply aren't due to her kit just being above all others. On top of this, she is incredibly fun to play when mastered, but most importantly, bottom line, she is the most rewarding champion in the game to pick up and master as a main. If someone you have to dedicate time to, you will be rewarded for it. So if you put in the hours to main and practice her, not only will you have a blast playing her with her insane mobility, all that burst, that damage over time, the healing, and her shroud, her signature shroud, the list goes on, but you'll be rewarded with the skill to carry more games than you'd ever be able to playing another assassin, and I can promise you that. She's simply the definition of a champion that is meant for people that like playing assassins, solo carrying, 1v5ing, and overall being an important part of winning the game for your team. Really quickly, we're just going to go over the spells in case you're new. Starting with her passive, when you use any damaging spell on an enemy champion, a circle forms around the spot that they're at when you hit them with that spell. Leaving the circle range gives you an extended range auto attack that does a lot of bonus damage. Akali's Q does almost instantaneous damage in a cone shape, and when you hit an enemy with the tip of your Q, you will briefly slow them. Your W is a shroud that is shaped like a donut, and if you're within the shroud, you're invisible to all enemies for 5 seconds. You also get a brief burst of movement speed when casting it, as well as a bit of instant energy regeneration. If you try to throw a spell or attack the enemy, you will leave invisibility, and you will be able to re-enter a second after you finish attacking. Control words do not reveal Akali's shroud, but most other things do, including LeBlanc's E, Lee Sin's Q, Nocturne's E, Kled's Q, Tower True Sight, etc, etc. Akali's E dashes her backwards and then throws out a shuriken. This shuriken can connect to any form of enemy, whether it be minions, jungle, baron, dragon, or most importantly, champions. It can also connect to your own shroud. You can also recast your E to fly towards whatever you've connected to. It's also important to mention that Akali's E does a lot of single target damage at all stages of the game. And now finally, we have Akali's ultimate. There are 2 casts, the first one being a targeted cast that you can only use on champions that dashes onto the enemy champion, doing a small amount of single target damage, and after 2.5 seconds, you're then able to cast the second part of your ultimate, which I call R2. R2 is an untargeted dash, meaning you can use it anywhere you want. It does a large amount of magic damage, doing more damage based off of each target you hit missing health. This means that it can be used as an execution or the final spell to kill them. As the lower health each target has, the more damage your R2 will be doing overall. We're going to start off this guide very strong by getting into the mind of an Akali one trick, aka me. I want you guys to watch this and analyze while I go along every single decision I make for a perfect 1v5 play. I try my best to explain everything, but keep rewatching this clip as needed. It will be extremely useful for you to understand how to play Akali at the absolute highest level. For this game, it is currently 11-17. We essentially have every kill with a few assists. We are very far behind. We have no vision anywhere, and we are needing to 1v5 this game. And if you look at the current situation on the minimap, you can see that we do not have any vision. We do not know where the enemy champions are. But because I'm playing Akali, I feel comfortable enough to try and see if I can make a play happen and just react accordingly to how they, their champions and their spells and all that. So you can see we go in right here. And what I don't want to do is ult the Anivia right here for a lot of reasons. The first one is if I ult, it's a linear spell. So Anivia is just going to easily get the stun off, and then she'll hit me with the E, and she's relatively fed off of my team, so I would lose at least half my health and probably die to missing enemies, because if we're grouped here, if they're not doing Baron at 20 minutes exactly, then people are nearby lurking. The enemy's champions, that's just called potential awareness. You need to know where they could potentially be and react accordingly without vision. So what I do here instead is I decide to E backwards to Gunblade, and I do that because I want to start weakening her. And right there you can see I want to E backwards to Gunblade or slow her down, but I don't want to be on top of her, because if I'm right next to her, she can go ahead and just throw her point blank range stun. But if I have a little bit of distance, should she throw her stun out, I just press my Shroud, I get a big burst of movement speed, and I can run directly sideways. And this is something that you have to be understanding. That if you know that your Anivia is going to throw her stun in reaction, likely, then you're ready to counter it out. So this is what happens. I E and then I Q, just to try and start weakening them. And then what do you know? Freaking Lee Sin shows up from the Fog of War that we didn't have vision on. So at that point, I just press my E. You know, might as well. It takes me a little bit further away. I'm running, and then I kind of did predict that Lee Sin was going to Q me at that exact second. I had no minions blocking. None of my minions were blocking. So I instantly Shroud for the big burst of movement speed, and I dodge that out. And then I obviously want to be using my passive, and then my spell. Keep getting your passive proc. It's very important. Lee Sin is the target at hand. He's the closest target. I essentially just want to kill the person in front of me because Anivia can just kite back, if nothing else. And I need to kill people. Trust me, you need to kill people as fast as you can. So right here, you know, I go in, and I'm actually going to explain why I ulted too. So as you can see, he is about to die. My passive's ready, and I just ult in to slice him with my passive proc, finish him off. And then right here, obviously, next step is to kill the bird in front of me. So we do Q, we get the passive proc because there's nothing else to do, and then we're able to execute her. I am trying to kill them as fast as physically possible, and I want to save my flash and stopwatch for the absolute last situation because they're high cooldowns. And as you can see, after I ulted Anivia and her egg is off, I then proc my passive on the Kled really quickly, and this is a very minor thing that I think is extremely important and no one does. You do want to always proc your passive. That healed me for 100 and something, and then I threw my E onto the Anivia just because, you know, I'm trying to get away, but I'm also going to do damage to the Anivia at the same time. Then, you know, I want to finish off Anivia. I wait a few seconds before I take that E back though, because I do want to be able to regenerate a bit of energy. If you see, had I taken the E immediately, I would not have had enough energy to finish her off very quickly. I'm just trying to go in for one super quick combo, kill her, and then run away, because right now it's a literal 1 versus 4. And then up next you got the Kled with almost no Skarl left. I did not Q hit flash because I'm trying to demount him. I Q flash because I Q and then I flash out, because when you get your passive to proc, you get a little bit of bonus movement speed. It did just turn out perfectly that he did demount. Past this point, I do proc my passive to heal and do damage to him, and this is another very important thing. I'm looking and I see my E is not up, so I want to run away, make that Caitlyn ult take as long as it takes, because it's a pretty slow travel. I'm going to make it take a long time. I'm going to keep running away, and I want to get my E mark onto the Kled, and then at this point, once the E mark's on him, I'm going to completely negate out the Caitlyn ult. My E mark is on the Kled with no Skarl, and I'm able to go ahead and fly in and kill that guy. So we're going to go ahead and quickly go over this one more time really quick. You don't want to ult in because you don't know what's there. You want to save your ult for what's necessary. I didn't even know that this was going to turn into a crazy fight at the time. At this point, I kill the Lee Sin, and now it's go time. I'm all up in my Shroud. Hit the Kled with the auto, E in, big burst, and then run away from them. Luckily, we're to do that. Passive proc. There we go. And then, yeah. Now moving on to the runes, guys, I want to say right now, there are so many different rune pages you can use. There really is no quote-unquote best answer. But with that said, I want to say that I have had the most success I've ever had using this exact rune page. Obviously, if you look right now, Alacrity is the one thing that is debatable. I like the quality of life attack speed to proc my passives faster and get combos off faster, but With that said, obviously Tenacity is a very solid rune choice. With that also being said, the defensive rune I choose is completely based off of what I'm laning against. I always try to win the lane, snowball it, and then win early and mid game, because that's when Akali shines. But on a completely different related note, if you want to go for fleet footwork, if you want to go for electrocute, they're not bad options. Grasp isn't even terrible, probably wouldn't use that one though, but they're not bad options. It's just a matter of, I don't think you need it. I think Akali can do so much better in solo queue. If you want to default to what I say just go for this rune page every single time. Alright guys, now moving on to items, I want to talk about everything from early, mid, and late game items. So what I like to start with, no matter what, is Longsword with a warding totem and 3 potions. On that note, a lot of people ask, why don't you use Doran Shield? The reason is I like to get Gunblade as fast as possible. The only times I would ever consider going for a Doran Shield would be either against a Kled, LeBlanc, or Pantheon, because those 3 champions make it almost impossible to play the game. But that's just my own personal preference, what I struggle with. In my opinion, there isn't a matchup you really need Doran Shield for. You can just play safe as you're supposed to anyways. As for the actual build path throughout the game, you should be recalling around level 5 just to try and get some items for your level 6 kill if you haven't gotten a kill already. Because once you hit level 6, you gain a massive amount of kill potential and pressure in the lane, which you should try to, get that first kill to snowball. So, depending on how much gold you have, you should try and get as much damage as possible, usually. Whether that be, say you have 900 gold, you can get 2 of these and then wait for a potion. Just get a little bit of sustain to get back to the lane. The bottom line is that between Hextech, Revolver, and Bilgewater, you should always go for what you can afford. If you can afford a Bilgewater, go for that. If you can't, then go for a Revolver and a Longsword, or if you can't afford any of it, maybe you can only afford 2 of these, that's okay too. Just get the most damage you can that builds into a Gunblade and try to kill them. Past that, try to get your Gunblade first before anything else. Don't really try to get Boots or Dark Seal. And now here comes the tricky, everything past the Gunblade. Because obviously getting a Gunblade is easy. Past that, you have to think about what you want to build. And how to do that? Well, it's a little interesting. 99% of the time you do want to go for a Sork Boots second item. It's just the best way to continue your snowball. Ideally you won't be any less than like 0 and 1, 0 and 2. Still get Sork Boots in that situation. Past that, it depends on the team comp. Sometimes you'll be going for a Zhonya's second item, sometimes you'll be going for a Oblivion Orb second item, and then a Zhonya's. As for Morellonomicons, you do not want to get that unless you want to make use of the anti-healing, the Grievous Wounds. If they don't have a lot of healing, then do not finish Morellos, just hold the Oblivion Orb. Past that, it is all situational, to be completely honest with you. Right here, at this point, I might get a Banshees if they have a lot of magic damage, or a spell I want to block out specifically. A lot of times I'll usually just go for Rabadons and then a Void Staff, because you don't really need a Void Staff till 6th item, being that you already have 18 Magic Pen from Boots, 15 Magic Pen from your Orb. There are so many different build paths, and another one potentially could be Guardian Angel for extra armor. Another one could be Death Stance. Only go for Death Stance though if they have a bunch of frontline champions and you're not able to really kill anyone, and you just want to provide more pressure than you're already doing with your Shroud, jumping into fights with Shroud, and then once that expires, you Zhonya's. If you still want more pressure, Death Stance will help you stay alive longer while your team kills for you, especially late game, for example, when you simply just can't kill anyone in a lot of situations. Go for Death Stance only then. And now really quickly, I wanted to go over the boots as well. 99% of the time you will be taking Sorcerer's Shoes. Even if they have crowd control on the enemy team, Merc Treads simply aren't necessary because Akali has her Shroud, so many dashes to dodge out skill shot CCs, Zhonya's, and all the healing to survive. Simply put, she doesn't need it unless you're against a team full of a bunch of crowd control. If there's so much crowd control you can't play the game, you don't think, then go for Merc Treads, but usually you don't need it. And when you should go for Ninja Tappies, well, you should only go for Ninja Tappies if they are almost an all AD team comp. I'm talking maybe their top lane, their mid lane, and they have an AD carry that are all AD, but their jungler is AP. In that case, go for Ninja Tappies as well as Dead Man's Plate and the whole anti-AD build. As for Lichbane, I highly recommend you never get it, but if you really want to go for it, the risk versus reward might kind of be there. if they are all squishy champions with relatively no crowd control. The problem with Lich Bane is it gives you no defensive stats or defensive active abilities, therefore it's just very troll. Another problem is you shouldn't get its second item because it scales with AP, so if anything you'd want to get it on the third or fourth item, but then at that point you're going to be a 1200 HP Akali while everyone else has 3 or 4 damage items. It's simply not ever a good option, to be completely honest with you. But with that said, if you like Lich Bane, go for it. It's not that true. As for other items, Triforce, genuinely, should probably never get it unless you're trying some troll build. Medjai's Soul Seal, on the other hand, is something that I would like to briefly talk about. Sometimes you go Dark Seal when you just have extra gold and you don't really want to build into anything else. Sometimes you can go for Medjai's, but the problem with that also is Akali is a squishy champion that jumps into the entire enemy team, meaning you're going to die a lot. With that said, if you're very confident that the game is going well, go for Medjai's to help you snowball it out. You know, it buys for 1400 and it sells for 1000, so it's not the end of the world if you do end up failing. Next up we have Tiamat. I highly recommend against it. And now guys, other than the few builds I've mentioned, in case you're going against a full AD or a full AP team comp, there are 2 specific builds. This is the armor build. You go for a Ninja Tabbies, you obviously still go for a Gunblade, you go for a Zhonya's because this is going to give you all armor. It's pretty standard. But past that, you can go for a GA, a Deadman's, and a Void Staff just to finish it off. And now what this is going to do is make you nearly impossible. You will win every single game against all AD comps because simply put, they can't do damage to an Akali with this much armor. And now as for Akali versus a full magic comp, you go for Merc Treads instead of Sork Boots. You do still go for the Gunblade. Common theme, as you can see, very important item. You go for a Banshees, and if they have a champion like a Fizz or a Veigar, champions that you can completely just make useless with the Zhonya's, then I still highly recommend going it for that active. But other than that, you get the Maw of Malmortius, and then you could finish it off with, you could just go for a Void Staff as well too. Probably just go for the Void Staff, to be honest. And now for Akali's early game. This can go one of 2 ways. Either you're against a champion that beats you in lane and can poke you out, or you're against a champion that you break even with and can outplay, or obviously, you know, champion that you just straight up beat in lane. But mostly it's going to be champions that you go 50-50 against and can outplay, with a few exceptions we'll go over at the end of the guide. Here's the thing about early game on Akali. Even if you're against a champion that quote-unquote beats you, you will win at level 6. And that's the beautiful thing about this. If you're against a champion like Syndra, Xerath, you just need to survive the lane with your 3 potions, and then eventually you will start winning the lane. The way you survive the lane is you use your Q to last it from far away, you use your E, you use your W, everything in your arsenal to just help you last hit. And eventually you'll find situations in which the enemy pushes too far because you're last hitting and they're just trying to shove the wave in, and then your jungler ganks, or if nothing else, you will just be able to kill them at level 6 because, simply put, this is what happens when Akali hits level 6. Every champion that beats Akali pre-6 is extremely squishy for the most part, or if nothing else, easy to kill with low mobility. I can't really think of a champion other than Kled that I can't just jump level 6, assuming we're both equal health, and kill. Simply put, Akali has just one of the strongest level 6s in League of Legends. As for champions that you play against that you beat or break even with in lane, it's going to be a complete skill matchup a lot of the time, depending on the matchup, because obviously every champion has different abilities that you have to react accordingly to, and for each specific matchup there will be a timestamp of a guide on how to play against that champion in the description, so check that out. As for general tips, you just want to try and play aggressive, push the limit, see if they fight back. If they try to jump on you, you use your E, but in reality it's going to be very hard for me to explain each individual matchup. Now, while we will have a specific combo section, this is what a high skill Akali combo looks like in the early game. Alright guys, and now for this clip, I want to show you exactly how you can play to win the early game versus melee champions like Zed, Fizz, Ekko. From the beginning of the wave, you want to start by threatening passive procs. Against champions like Zed, he can only hurt you really if he hits you directly with his Q before it hits any minions. If you're behind minions or you just dodge his Q overall, he will not be able to do damage. So after your first 2 initial Qs trying to threaten to passive procs, you back up a little bit into your minions, wait for yourself to get the energy again, and then you go for the same exact thing. I wasn't able to get the passive proc but onto Zed, but I still want to auto a minion because he's pushing the wave with his Q, and at the same time I want to passive proc because it gives me 10 energy. I might as well get that energy regenerated. But yeah, you see he goes in, but the thing is we've withered him down a little bit. We hit 2 at the same exact time, and this is in Diamond Elo, we're able to take a free early kill. And now inversely, this is what happens when ranged champions try to play against Akali mid. They shove the wave trying to poke her out with their spells, and eventually you can go in for a backwards E to Q them, hit them with the slow, your jungler will gank the overextended mid laner, and you should be able to pick up free kills that way as well. Now guys, here is where it gets really, really good. From level 6 and beyond, all the way until around level 15, 16, when you start falling off late game, mid game is Akali's bread and butter. This is what makes her viable as a champion. This is what makes her extremely broken for solo queue. In solo queue, most games are decided by early and early mid game, and Akali thrives at snowballing, which means getting 1 kill and turning into many as a champion in ranked. She is able to do things that no other champion can do. She's able to 1 versus 2 so frequently. She's able to 1 versus 3 enemies at Dragon or tower dive 80 carries, tower dive mid laners, you name it, she can probably do it, and it's hilariously broken. So with that in mind, there are several things you can do to maximize your mid game potential. First things first though, you always want to be pushing the lane, whether it be top or preferably mid lane. That's my preferred lane. You want to shove the wave in, and you want to look to either roam to gank a different lane, invade the enemy jungler, try and contest Scuttle Crab, but most importantly, these are the things you want to always focus on: getting turret plates and forcing Dragon and Rift Herald fights. You forcing fights as Akali mid game is what is going to win you games, because it forces the enemy team to leave the safety of their towers, and if you have half a clue as to what you're doing on Akali, you can destroy everything mid game. Honestly, every time there's a team fight at Rift or Dragon that's equally numbered, assuming you're not too underfed, obviously situations will vary, you can turn small leads or just equal games into massive leads. And obviously a large part of that's going to come down to knowing mechanics and practicing. And on that note, watching my videos, watching my streams can help you really get the hang of Akali if you've never seen a video before especially. I highly recommend you guys check out my stream and my other videos. Shameless plug, I suppose. But yeah, the bottom line is you want to be forcing as much as you possibly can in the mid game, because that is where Akali shines. That is where she does all the work. You don't really want to split push because you're so much better grouping and diving and fighting. But in terms of split pushing, as a general rule of thumb, try not to do it too much unless you really can't take anything. There's no objectives up to fight over, because at the end of the day, if they don't fight you at Dragon during all of mid game, your entire team is going to end up having Dragon Soul by late game. You're going to get Baron for free, and then they should be able to win the game for you by then. And really quick, here is a clip of a successfully snowballed mid-game Akali 2 versus 5ing the entire enemy team. If that doesn't prove she's broken in the right hands, I don't know what would. Now guys, here is the part where most Akalis struggle with. We have Akali's late game. Depending on the team comp, this can either be a minor nightmare or a absolute terror. She is not the worst champion in the world late game, but because most players have a brain that is a little bit bigger than the size of a peanut, they'll start building magic resist if they're dying to you over and over again. And generally, once it gets to the later stages of the game, Akali isn't able to do as much as you'd like to against a lot of team comps that have 2 or 3 bruisers or tanks and champions that have a lot of crowd control. Even just supports like Lulu can reveal Akali and Shroud and polymorph her and completely make it impossible to kill carries or assassinate anyone. So with that in mind, you have to look for your best opportunity to jump in and use your Shroud and provide as much threat as possible. because if you have a Shroud and they know you're in there, in the enemy's backline of a team fight, they will have to at least back up, and that'll give your team more time to do damage. And simply put, there's so much theory to Akali's late game, but in general, the rule of thumb is to just try and ult in and then drop your Shroud, do what you can, go back into Shroud. When your Shroud expires, use Zonius, and overall, better hope that your AD carry is going to carry you in most situations. With that said though, there are certain team comps that you can still do a lot with. Usually those are the ones that don't involve a Lulu, don't involve a lot of point-and-click crowd control like Lissandra, Annie. Alright guys, and now it is time for the legendary combo guide. This is the most requested thing I have ever had in terms of anything Akali guide related, and it is finally time for me to put in the time to make it. I hope you guys are excited. Starting off with my favorite and most guaranteed kill combo, you ult and then you start Eing backwards in the middle of your ult to guarantee you connect your first E onto the enemy. At that point you can hit them with the passive proc, then you can Q back up, and then you have your E to fly onto them, and then you can execute them with the R2. The variations of this are limitless, but the bottom line is you want to ult them and then hit them with the E to guarantee that you can use your E2 and fly towards them in multiple ways. As for a typical combo in lane around level 3 and 4, well, you can see I'm able to jump through 2 enemy waves towards a ranged champion simply because I hit my first Q from a max range, which is able to slow them. I'm able to get a burst of movement speed myself to get towards them, use my Shroud movement speed as well to get towards them, also giving me almost full energy. After I proc the first passive proc, I then Q again. I then also try to throw my E out just for a little bit of damage on the way out, and I take no damage in exchange even though there's a giant wave because I'm abusing the Shroud. And now I want to show you guys 2 different things. The first combo I do onto Fiddle, I do not use my ultimate because I don't think it's necessary on him. He's squishy enough for me to one-shot him, and that's something related to combos you have to understand. It's not always about doing the best combo, it's about doing what makes the most sense for the situation. With that in mind, I do have an actual combo for you guys, and that is when I'm in the middle of R2ing towards Vayne, I use my Gunblade right before my R2 lands to weaken Vayne's health to increase the damage of my R2 as it scales with missing health, being that it's an execution. Next up, we have something that I don't think most of you know, and it's actually extremely overpowered if you know about it, but check this out. If you max range the Q, you see right here we're not even max range, we don't get the passive proc, we have to just back up into it. Well, if you're exactly max range, you can simply just press your Q at the very tip, and then you get an instant passive proc, which can be useful. But now there is another mechanic combo that goes with it. You can actually trick the game into thinking that you are outside of the Q range when you hit the target with your Q, even when you're flying into it, because the E is complete spaghetti code. Riot has no idea what they're doing as a company. So what you can actually do is E backwards and Q at the same time, and then mid E, if you hit your Q on the enemy, you will get the instant passive proc. So right there, we actually got the passive proc. It's actually so easy to do, you can pretty much do it every time. Next up, these are the most essential things you need to hop into practice tool when you're done with this guide and start practicing. These are the E's over the walls in mid lane and the Dragon and Baron pit. It's pretty hard to do, you know, if I'm not experienced, maybe I'll think I just run up to this wall and press E. That's not how it works. You have to go specifically into this little crack, put your mouse over here, and then you'll be able to fly in. Same thing for right here, this giant mushroom right here is where you want to aim for, and then literally just point directly to the opposite end and then fly over. Same thing for the other side. It's a little bit harder on this side, but you just have to get right here and then E backwards. And then right here, there's like this little, it's kind of like just arrows telling you step here, and then you press E backwards and you can fly there. And now as for this, you may not know, but you can actually E this way. This is extremely useful for dragon fights. Same here, you can do it right here and then E there for Baron fights, but also keep in mind, when you're playing top lane, imagine you're getting ganked wherever you run to the river. You can simply just run right here, press E, and escape so many ganks. Same thing with this right here. You just need to go ahead and fly over. This one is a little bit more difficult, and I highly recommend against it if you're struggling to learn it. Unless you get really good at it, then you can start doing it. But really just practice a lot. Next up guys, I'm going to show you how to clear out jungle quickly. It's very important as Akali to clear out the jungle as well as the waves if you have nothing better to do. So keep in mind, if you were to try and queue all of these, you would not be able to hit all of them no matter which way you took. It would not be able to get all of them. So what you can do is actually auto attack, pull them all there, and then you can queue them all at the same time. Or even better, you can auto attack really quickly, back up just a tiny bit, and then hit all of them. Hit them again with the Q, and then finish off the big one with the E. As for taking out the jungle, you definitely want to use your abilities. Next up, we have a combo that you should really look to avoid using because you're using two of your most important spells, but that is the W into the E combo. You can actually just do that and then fly in, and then you'll have a safe return flight back home to where you threw your shroud. It should only be used in very specific situations, but something I figured I would mention anyways. Next up, I'm going to show you guys how to clear waves in the mid and late game. Obviously, you can't queue all these at once, but what you can do with your limited amount of energy is actually go into this and make one giant cone and try and clear out as many as you possibly can. It's going to be much better than just waiting for them to try and hope that they build up in a perfect cone for you. Once again, that's going to look something like this, where you just go ahead and build them up, and then they build up, and you can hit them all like that. Alright guys, so say you're recalling and you want to get back to lane really quick while you're regenerating. There are two different ways to get back to lane as fast as possible. If you are trying to heal up really quickly, what you can do while you're healing is wait a little bit. Obviously, you get more healing in the middle, but once you get a little bit later on, you can actually just throw your W and your E, and what that'll do is it'll extend over time a little bit your shroud, meaning that you can get further towards the lane. But say you end up recalling and you're full health, what you can do at that situation is just E backwards and then W for the movement speed burst. It should be back up. Obviously, do not use your W, warning, if there is action going on around your base, because you really need your shroud for team fights. Alright guys, now I could continue for another 20 minutes about different combos, mechanics, and tips and tricks, but I've already posted all of the most important things and more on the guide so far. If you want to learn about more mechanics, more combos, more tips and tricks, check out all these videos you're seeing on the screen, but for now, it's time to move on. Alrighty guys, and now for the matchups guide. I will give you a few tips on every single matchup, and be sure to refer back to this in the description where I will timestamp each and every single matchup by the champion name. So starting off, we have Aatrox. Usually you'll play against him top lane, but generally you do not want to try and trade him at level 1 because he simply does too much damage. If he hits you with the Q, his passive procs, he'll heal. Do not try to fight him until around level 3. At that point, you should be able to try and dodge out his Q, maybe try and bait him into throwing it out, and then once he misses the first one, the next few should be pretty easy. You got to be aware of his dash ability too, but overall, it's a pretty simple matchup at level 3, so I highly recommend you do not play aggressive until then, but past that point, just try to play it out. You will have to outplay him by baiting out his Qs, by trying to hit him with an E when he tries to dash towards you, and overall use your shrouds to your advantage. But this matchup is a mostly skill matchup. I would say it's about a 50-50 matchup. Just be sure you try and wait for your cooldowns to be up when you go on him, otherwise he's going to run you down. Next up we have Ahri. This is a champion that you should not try to fight at level 1, and you should not try to fight at level 2. At level 1, you're not able to get in range, she'll auto you and then Q you, she'll proc electrocute, and she'll take an amazing trade on you. At level 2, it's the same exact thing. If you try to run up to her, she's going to charm you in the face. But at level 3, once the minion wave is about evened out, you don't want to fight Ahri the second you hit level 3 if there's a giant wave at your turret, and there usually is. But around 3.5, level 4, when the wave is back to even, the tower destroys that giant wave around level 3, and then it's about even, then you can look to play aggressive. Try to Q her, but be behind your minions, or just run left and right to zigzag so she can't hit you with the charm. The goal is to not get hit by the charm. After you hit her with the Q, then you back up a little bit, get your passive proc, and then you can use your shroud to try and run up to her, hit her with the passive proc, Q her again, and then maybe even E on the way out. Just try to wither her down. Post 6, it's not easy to kill her, but it gets pretty easy. You have to try and hit her with the ult whenever you can. She's a pretty low range champion in that way, but if you can connect the ult onto her, then you have to try and maybe ult her and then run sideways or dash, hit her with the E Something to not get by the charm, but if you are going to get hit by the charm, it's not a big deal if you have your E2 on her, because at that point you can just, she'll try to run away, you can follow her at the E2, and then you can go ahead and fly right through, do the classic level 6 combo, and luckily Akali has the tools needed to stick onto the Ahri. She's very squishy, should be able to kill her at level 6. Next up we have Anivia. This matchup is specifically tricky if you're unexperienced with the matchup, but here's the thing about Anivia. You don't want to get hit by the Q, that's pretty much it. If Anivia ever hits you with an E without getting you slowed or stunned by her Q, it's not going to do bonus damage, and essentially it just tickles you. So with that in mind, just all you have to do is be very careful, don't get too close to the minion. If she's on top of your minions you're trying to farm, and then you're trying to run up to last hit, she's going to stun you point blank, and that is going to hurt a lot. What you can do is about a few Teemos from the distance you get to Anivia, you can try to maybe bait out her Q, like run, like you're pretending to hit to last hit a minion, and then you just back up or sidestep. Once her stun's down, it's on a pretty high cooldown. You have a lot of opportunity to zone her, harass her, and then you can start withering her down. It's a pretty straightforward matchup because Anivia is also a pretty short range champion that doesn't have so much long distance wave clear. So she's relying on her Q, and if that's down, you can use your best mechanics to try and beat her in the early game. But once it hits level 6, you'll just try to shove the wave. That's okay, you just have to shove back and roam. Not going to be too many opportunities for you to kill her post 6, but especially since she builds tanky. But at that point, you can just try and shove as she shoves, and then roam around, and then look for plays, get her out of her tower, and then, she's an immobile mage. Well, if she's not under a tower, it gets a lot easier to kill her, so you can invade, you can go for dragons, roam top or bot, stuff like that. And now for Annie. Annie is also a pretty interesting matchup in that she does a lot of point and click harass, but at the same time she is a pretty squishy champion with no escape. So with that in mind, what I would say is, other than keeping track of her stun passive, just keep in mind when she uses her Q. It's a pretty low cooldown, but there are small windows in which when she uses her Q on a minion, because a lot of, if not most Annies use their Q to last hit, you can go ahead and go for a small combo, Q her, and then get your passive proc, Shroud for the movement speed burst, auto her, passive proc her, and then Q again, maybe throw an E on the way out. Try to wither her down slowly and surely, take these small trades here and there, wait for your cooldowns to come back up, but overall, level 1, level 2, try to last hit from a distance. You can take the initial first 3 minions that come into the game by autoing, because she really won't be able to hurt you that much, and if she does try to harass you, your minions will fight back. But past that, just wait till around level 3, level 4, till you have 1 point in each spell, wait for her to use her spells, or if at least take 50-50 trades. Also at level 6, when she has her tippers, you have to be extremely careful about not dipping below 70% health, because Annie can kill you around that 70% mark. She has so much damage with tippers, obviously, so you definitely want to make sure you have potions throughout the lane. If you're ever recalling a level 5 in anticipation of a level 6 fight, make sure you have potions. Maybe even go for a Dark Seal and some potions instead of an Amplifying Tome, just to really give you that extra early game damage and healing. Now for Aurelion's Soul. This one is tricky if you're against a good Aurelion Soul, but for the most part it should be an extremely easy matchup. All you have to do is abuse him by just constantly going in for trades here and there. Your Shroud should make it so it's pretty hard for him to fight back. Aurelion Soul is a champion that really thrives off of just shoving the wave and roaming anyways. He's not looking to kill an Akali in lane. So with that in mind, try your best to wither him down whenever he extends for you to combo him. If you're not able to do that, just make sure you're keeping an eye on him. If you don't see where he is, remember, he can get from mid lane to top or bot within like 7 seconds with a giant stun, fully charged, so be sure you are pinging your team as fast as possible. And now for Azir. This champion is very unpopular as I'm making this video, but he is still very deadly. All he's going to do is try and poke you to death. He's going to summon soldiers and try to have them auto you, so with that in mind, make sure you're on one side of the lane. He summons a soldier, say to the left side, because you're on the left side, then run to the right side. It's all about just minimizing the poke he does, because in reality it's impossible to fully get rid of Azir's poke. Luckily it doesn't hurt too bad unless he gets multiple autos off per soldier, but if you limit the amount of autos you take per soldier from 1 to 2, then you'll be able to survive the lane until 6. Post level 6, I do not recommend trying to fight Azir unless he is just wide open for you to E him. He is at your tower, and then you can fly into him with your E and then Q auto. Then you can fly into him with your E. You can passive proc. You can Q, use your shroud, and then keep chunking him that way. But in general, Azirs won't let that happen. They're going to make your life a nightmare. So just try and get as many minions as you can. With your spells pre-6. Post-6, try to let him shove into you. And then, you do that classic combo where you ult into him. You hit him with the E. And then even if he pushes you with his ult, you have your E2 to fly into him. You have your R2 to fly into him. It's a pretty hilariously easy matchup to kill him at. And also be aware, don't waste your ult just for him to fly into his turret with his spells. Yeah, overall, just be careful, but then you can kill him at 6 easy. Next up, we have Brand. This is a very unpopular matchup as... Oh, it doesn't matter. Next up, we have Brand. This champion is going to try and poke you to death, but Akali can do a lot of work against Brand with her Shroud. Keep in mind, when you are on fire from Brand's passive, whenever he hits a spell, he starts hitting you with damage over time. Every time that damage over time hits you, it will reveal where you are in the Shroud. He won't see you, but a little image of you and invisibility will pop up. So keep that in mind. You won't be able to completely juke out his skill shots when you pop out. But you can actually use that in your favor. Say you know that it pops out, he's going to see you on the left side of your Shroud. The second after you finish popping out to reveal yourself where you are, you can go to the other side of the Shroud and maybe make him miss spells that way. But overall, just avoid level 1 poke, just try to stay safe. Level 2, you can definitely try to hit him with an E. Usually they'll have E, W, and then get their Q at level 3, so you'll have a lot of opportunity to kill him at level 2 if you can land your E, because simply put, an Akali level 2 does a lot of damage to Brand. He's a squishy champion and he has no escape, so your first honest kill potential will be at level 2. Past that, level 3, if you can try and wither him down, but you don't want to get hit by the stun and hit by his passive, because then he'll just back up afterwards. But past that, level 6, extremely easy kills. Just to use something, your E, your R, something to dodge his stun if possible. If not, as long as you're not ulting or Eing backwards into his tower, you're going to do so much damage to him that it doesn't even matter if he hits you with the stun. Because simply put, Akali can kill Brand 100 to 0 in about 6 seconds. It would take a Brand with all of his spell cooldowns at level 6 about 15 seconds. So just feel free to just jump on him and destroy him at level 6. Next up, we have a Caitlyn. If you ever have the misfortune of going against a Caitlyn, no pun intended, if you ever have to go against a Caitlyn mid or top, just get cloth armor and some potions and just try to survive the lane until 6. It's really that simple. You're not going to be able to kill a Caitlyn. If you try to jump into her, she's going to just non-stop poke you out. If you try to dash into her, she's going to E you and then hit you with the headshot. There is no good option for this lane until 6. But once you hit 6, she's an 80 carry in your lane. It's hilariously free gold. Just jump her. Be wary of her traps because those will completely destroy you. You have to work around those, but I'm sure you can do it. Best of luck on this one. Next up, we have the Cassiopeia matchup. So this champion is going to be a little interesting for you. I would say just try your best to stay just outside of range of Cassiopeia's Q. Most Cassiopeias start E level 1, then go Q level 2. But if she goes Q, either way, it doesn't matter. All you need to know is the range, roughly, about how far she can cast her Q. Sometimes you can try and bait out champions like Syndra Q, Cassiopeia Q. Like pretend you're going to go run up to auto attack a minion and then back up when you think she's going to throw her Q onto you. It's actually not as hard as you think once you start practicing it. So yeah, when your minions around, 1 or 2 autos from death, start running towards it, and then when you're allegedly supposed to try and last hit it, then you back up. Then her cooldown will be down, then you might be able to take a trade onto her, maybe zone her off of a minion with your pressure. But anyways, past that, level 3 is when you get every spell, level 3 is when she gets every spell. If you can dodge 1 Q, then you have the green light to go in, but if you get hit by her Q, she's going to hit you with a ton of ease and she is going to combo the crap out of you. I don't even think you can win a 1 versus 1 at level 3. It would be very close and not worth it essentially. So just on that note, if you get hit by a Q, do not go in for the trade unless you know you can kill her obviously. But if you can dodge the Q, try to go in for your own combo. Maybe you can E backwards, fly into her Q, passive proc, go into Shroud, Q her again, passive proc again, and then once her Q comes back up on like the 4 whatever second cooldown, then just reset, get your energy. But this lane is going to be more Cassiopeia sided for sure, but if you're good enough, you can definitely kill them. I'm killing Diamond Cassiopeia at level 4 all the time, simply because they feel confident enough to overextend, and then they end up taking one bad trade too many. It only takes 2 or 3 good combos to kill them around level 4. Anyway, next up we have the Cho'gath matchup. So Akali versus Cho'gath is something that is going to be a little annoying for you at first. Just thinking about all of Cho'Gath's abilities, his Q is going to be an AoE knockup that pokes you, his W is going to be an annoying poke that silences you, and his E can be used through minions to poke you. Everything with all that said, it is going to be a lot easier than you think. All you have to do is understand the different types of combos he can do. He can either try and Q you first and then W you, in which case if he tries to Q you first, all you have to do is E it backwards or press W, and then he can't auto you follow it up, but try to just E out of the Q. That's what I highly recommend. If not, use your Shroud burst of movement speed to just run out of the Q range. That's the first way he can combo you. The second way would be he hits you with a W. On that note, you can kind of assume a Q is coming up, and Cho'Gath's Q is pretty easy to dodge, I'll tell you that much. So just around the time after he finishes casting his Q, or his W rather, so around the time after he finishes casting his W, it takes about a second to channel, because he can't just instantly WQ at the same time. He's about to cast his Q right after, right? So completely just 180 the direction you're going, and that's going to work a lot of the time. You'll completely make him miss his Q. Other than that, he is a champion that naturally shoves the wave due to all of his spells being AoE, even his E is AoE. So once you hit around level 4 or 5, it's going to be extremely easy to start poking him out. Or if you don't want to do that, if you want to wait till 6, he's going to always shove the wave. So that means that just all you have to do is try to freeze the wave right outside of your tower. You guys both hit level 6 and he is as good as dead. There's no way a Cho'Gath at his tower is going to survive you unless you really mess up, to be completely honest with you. Next up, we have the Corki versus Akali matchup. And this one is extremely interesting as well. The thing about Corki is he likes to auto attack you and Q you, but his stuff is a very, very short range, to be completely honest with you. So when he tries to auto you in your last hitting, or he tries to just auto you and Q you, ideally you do not want to take the poke of his Q, but you can absolutely trade back. And I think that's something that a lot of Akali's mains don't understand, is if he goes into Q you, you can definitely just try and Q him back and then get a passive proc and then fly back in. And then at that point, you can go in through your Shroud, you can hit him with that passive proc we talked about, you can hit him with another Q and then E and fly out, and then he's going to be left with, he's going to have nothing to do. He's going to have his E channeling, you might get an auto off in that time, but simply put, you're going to take better trades if you play aggressive in this matchup. But as for levels 1 through 5 and level 6, level 1, Akali versus Corki. Corki's going to win, be a little bit careful on that. Level 2, if he'd have to mess up, you'd have to let you hit him with an E. So if you can't hit Corki with an E, you most likely won't be able to. Be careful on that as well. But level 3, once you have that Shroud to help you maneuver, once you have that Shroud for that bonus movement speed, then that's when you realistically can start winning the lane. But as I mentioned before in different matchups, do not try and fight a Corki or anyone when they have a giant minion wave. Usually around level 3, if you're playing passive, there will be a big enemy minion wave built. Just wait until it evens out in the mid lane after your tower destroys. It might be around level 3.5, level 4. Then you can start playing aggressive, assuming you haven't taken too much damage, which you shouldn't. You should be very careful, always take even trades. Next up, we have Darius versus Akali. This one is extremely dangerous if you make a mistake. Darius can run you down with his ghost or flash W you, and then he can 5-stack you and just absolutely decimate you. So with that in mind, at level 1, you can absolutely play aggressive if you want to, but it's not going to do much against a bruiser. Level 2, he is going to have his W most likely, and you're going to have your E, and you're still not going to do too much damage, but you can absolutely try to take even trades if you want to. I don't even think you need to take trades level 2 versus Darius, but you absolutely should, if you feel the situation is right, it's going to be, you're pretty much going to break even in any trade you take versus Darius level 2, unless you outplay him. If he's a good Darius, it might be a little bit of an issue. But here's the thing now, around level 3 is when you can absolutely start trying to outplay him, assuming the waves are about even. The thing is, Darius's Q does not do anything if you run into him, and your Akali Shroud is very, very useful for getting in the middle of a Darius, making him not heal, making him not do damage. And then once you get rid of his Q, you can hit him with a few spells of your own and then fly back out with your E to safety, wait for your energy to regenerate, wait for your stuff to come back up again, and then everything should be good. A very important warning against Darius: do not find yourself getting caught halfway into the lane with no Shroud and no E. It doesn't matter if you have Flash Up. If you're halfway in the lane and Darius sees you without cooldowns, he is going to slow you and run you down. It is a common Darius tactic that you should never have the misfortune of dealing with. It's very, very brutal how much damage he can do and how oppressive that slow is. So keep that in mind. But the level 6 and beyond, it's just a matter of killing him like any other champion. You have Ignite to stop his heal if you want to, but you don't have to ignite his heal. It's more so just be very methodical in the way you kill Darius level 6. Don't rush into anything. He's going to take some time to wither down. All of your passive procs are needed here. So when you ult him and then you eat backwards, you're going to hit him with the passive proc, then you want to Q him and then back up, get another passive proc, fly in with your E, get another passive proc maybe before you even R2 to execute, wither him down, and then make that R2 count. Next up we have Diana. This is a very interesting matchup because a lot of people don't know in which way it goes. I can tell you right now, it is essentially up to Diana to make the mistake, and what I mean by that is you can't really fight her when she has her shield up. Simply put, her W will negate your Q auto damage, but if she greedily uses her W, you can absolutely go in for a trade of your own. And when I say she can completely negate out your poke, I do not mean don't try to be aggressive, because a lot of the time if you just Q and then run towards a Diana, this is almost all Diana players, they're not that smart, guys. All you have to do is Q them and then get your passive proc ready and run at them like you're threatening to passive proc them. Then they use their W, and then you know what? You don't have to stick around while they have a shield. You don't have to fight them while they have a shield. Just back up with your E or Shroud if you want to, but highly prefer if you use your E to back up, because Shroud can be used much better off in different situations. Anyways, another tip for the Akali versus Diana matchup is, now with the new Diana rework, she can dash onto you from level 2 and beyond with her Q and then her E. You might even want to let her dash onto you. I know that sounds crazy, but if Diana Qs you at level 2 or 3 and you just run to the side away from minions, she dashes onto you, you get to E her, a point and blank E, then you can passive proc her because your E is gonna, hit her and then give you that passive proc. Then you can fly in with your E2, and I've actually killed quite a few Dianas just by baiting them out, because realistically, her level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 QE combo doesn't do that much damage, especially compared to an Akali doing all the things I just mentioned. But post level 6, it's extremely easy to destroy Diana. Her ultimate is a AoE spell, and your ultimate is meant to decimate one target, so keep that in mind. You win level 6 and beyond, assuming you don't make mistakes for her to wither you down, and then she just all-ins you. Next up, we have Ezreal. This champion is going to be extremely annoying to lane against if you ever have to, but I'll just leave it at this. If you're going against an Ezreal in lane, let him do his thing, let him try and poke you out, just don't get forced to recall pre-6. The thing is, once again, he is an 80 carry in a lane versus a level 6 Akali at some point. You just have to get there. You will be able to absolutely destroy him post 6. If he tries to poke you with his Q from max range, just stay behind minions. Past that, he won't be able to get all the farm. But even then, if he tries to do that, you can E backwards, Q him to slow him. He's going to be forced to E out. And then at that point, if he tries to run back in for minions, you can maybe try to ult him. Lots of different variations, but overall, it's Ezreal's lane to lose. And as long as you don't mess up as a Akali, you simply can't die. Next up, we have Fiora. This is a matchup that can be 50-50 or a little bit tricky. The thing about Fiora is she's always going to try to either parry your passive proc or the second part of your ultimate, depending on what level this is happening at. But if that's not happening, if you have your Shroud up or your E, you should be able to always take even or slightly better trades against Fiora. The same thing with Fiora applies to Darius, where if you get caught halfway into the top lane with no Shroud or no E, we'll call them your escape spells, she can literally run you down so well that you're just gonna die. You're gonna be like, what the heck just happened? I just lost my entire health bar. Because simply put, Fiora is a duelist, but Akali can destroy Fiora when she tries to fight Akali. When Akali's Shroud is up, you can just juke her out, you Q her, and then go into your Shroud, end up on the other side of where she's waiting. And simply put, it's an easy matchup if you know how to use your Shroud, but don't get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, or whatever the expression is. Just be safe without spells. Next up, we have Fizz. This is a relatively straightforward matchup. He can do a lot of different things at level 1. If he starts with his E at level 1, then simply put, he just can't trade you. He might try to E onto you, but at that point you can Q him, and then you might end up taking less damage. You won't be able to get your passive proc because you Q him when he E's on top of you. By the time you back up to get your passive proc, he'll be way towards his tower. That's fine, you'll take a slightly bad trade at level 1, but now his E is down for the next 20 seconds or something ridiculous. And then at that point, your Q is going to be back up again. Then you can start zoning him off of minions or force him to take a lot of damage past that point. Alternatively, if he starts at W level 1, what you can do is just outrange him. You'd have to Q him and then try to hit him with a passive proc. If you're in the middle of swinging your passive proc at level 1, he can W you, but usually he's going to run away right after he W's you, and then in which case you can run towards him and hit him with another Q, taking a slightly good trade from there as well. Past that point, you do want to always look to E him when he Qs you. It's very easy to do. He cannot cancel his Q in the middle of the cast with his E, therefore your E will always be able to hit the Fizz while he's in the middle of dashing towards you. Very straightforward. And then I guess past that, at level 6, he's going to try and throw a long range ult. They always do. Fizz is a champion that tries to snowball just like Akali does at level 6. And with that in mind, you can try to juke it out by, like, if you know you're in Fizz's kill range, if he were to hit you with his ult, you're going to die. You can kind of like know that and kind of maybe like pretend you're running one way to try and get back to your tower. In reality, you know he's going to throw it out and then you just back up, sidestep it. Other than that, you can just try and use your E to dash away from the ult. That works too. You know, it's a little bit of a cooldown that you might want at level 6, but you know you can use your E. It's not a big deal. Oh, all those things combined, Fizz is a pretty easy matchup to beat. I also recommend you get a Zhonya's second item after Gunblade against Fizz. Even though he is AP, the Zhonya's active is very useful. Next up, we have Galio. Galio is a champion that most Akalis will struggle with, myself included, but the thing is, depending on how he plays aggressive or not, does he go Ignite, does he go Teleport, does he go for Corrupting Potion or Doran's Ring? If he goes for Ignite and Doran's Ring, you definitely have a chance of killing him in lane. He's already kind of tanky, but the reality is, Galio is a very easy to juke out champion. Everything from his Q, his dash, his Q and his dash are pretty straightforward in how you can dodge them or bait them out. And when those cooldowns are down, you can essentially just abuse him. He is a very, very slow, immobile champion without, his dash. So just really look to play through his cooldowns. It is his lane to lose, to be completely honest. If he decides he doesn't want to play aggressive, he doesn't want to lose this lane, and he just wants to farm, you really can't do anything against the Galio because simply put, you try to force the aggression, he's going to take a better trade. So keep that in mind. If nothing else, just try to hit level 6 and then try to kill him. If that doesn't work, then just look to roam, force dragon fights. You'll have a little bit of a unsnowballed mid-game going into the game, but you'll still be Akali with a mid-game. Next up, we have Gangplank. This champion is going to be kind of a struggle because in reality, most of them go Grasp and then they just spam Qs onto you and grass proc. There's not much you can do about it, but what I would recommend for this matchup is wait until level 3, whether it be mid or top lane. Usually they'll be pushing to some extent. You want to try and freeze the wave closest to your tower so you have a lot of room to work with. But once you guys are both level 3 or level 4, Akali can easily jump the Gangplank, use your standard combos we talked about throughout this guide, and just absolutely kill him. Be a little bit careful about the barrels, but in reality, if you catch the Gangplank being aggressive, a little bit overextended, and you have full health, and he doesn't have a giant wave that's going to destroy you, Gangplank is a pretty weak early game champion. You have to remember, Akali beats melee champions, all things considered. It should be a slam dunk around level 4, level 3, or even level 5 or 6. Next up, we have Garen. Garen is going to be all different kinds of difficult because Garen is a champion that absolute idiots play and absolute beasts play. Depending on the Garen, most of them will be relatively straightforward. You'll Q them and then back up and passive proc them at the same time Garen hits you with his Q, and then he'll start spinning while you E out. You're going to end up taking 50-50 trades most of the time, but eventually once you become more experienced Akali, you'll learn to space properly, you'll learn to position. So the Q autos that would normally lead into Garen hitting you with his own Q would end up being a Q onto Garen, and then you E backwards, and then once his movement speed buff from his Q expires, then you auto him, and then you take a slightly better trade. It's not going to be as much damage or health loss from both people, but it is going to win you the lane slowly but surely. Past that, level 6, you pretty much destroy Garen. Try not to R2 when he uses his little shield, his W, because that makes him tanky. You can pretty much just press E and just maybe wait it out and then dash onto him right after it expires. It only lasts a second or two, his W, and then yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know for that matchup. Now we have Gnar. Gnar is a very, very confusing matchup for a lot of people. In reality, here's the thing about him. He is a low-ranged champion. Now, I know it's kind of confusing, but in terms of him being a ranged champion or AD carry marksman, he has a very low attack range. This means that Akali can essentially always beat Gnar every single time, because simply put, Gnar does not do enough damage trading ranged as a ranged champion. His auto Q will not do nearly the same amount of damage as an Akali's Q passive proc rather. And then past that, once you hit level 3, level 2, if you land an E onto the Gnar, he is absolutely dead. He's a very squishy champion in terms of bruisers. He's honestly just a very easy champion for Akali to beat all on the board. I don't think you can really mess up. The only way you can mess up is if you find yourself overextending to try and kill him, and then you end up missing all your spells, you have nothing left, and then at that point he can just run you down through the entire lane until you get to your tower. Just be careful, but if you have your Shroud ready to go in the middle of the lane, you're actually able to try your best to take trades and destroy him, and then if all else fails, hide into your invisibility and run back to lane and wait the 18 or 23 seconds for your Shroud to come back up. Next up, we have Gragas. This is a very cheesy matchup you'll probably never go against until Diamond Elo, but in case you do, just know that he is probably too tanky for you to kill. Most Gragases will go tanky, but if he doesn't, I highly recommend not playing aggressive against this champion, because simply put, his poke is too strong, he's too tanky, and overall, he can do a lot of damage to Akali within her Shroud, because everything he has is AoE besides his W. So just keep that in mind. I would recommend either looking for a lane swap if it were me, but realistically that's not always going to happen. I would just look to farm the lane, to be honest. Hit level 6 and then try to kill him, because anything past that is going to be difficult. But at the same time, I do recommend just testing the waters to see if you can outplay the Gragas, because it's a skill matchup that I think, in my opinion, it's Gragas's to win. Next up, we have Heimerdinger. Oh boy, guys, if you're watching this right now and you're about to go against a Heimerdinger, I'm not saying good luck, you're screwed, but good luck, you're screwed. No, but seriously though, you're not going to absolutely get decimated in this lane, but you're not going to be able to kill Heimer. If you try, you're probably going to get turned on. If your jungler tries to gank, you're probably going to get 2v1. That's simply the nature of the game of Heimer versus Akali. There's not really much you can do to clear out his turrets. He's going to try and poke you out in the lane with his W's and E's. You need to be very wary of his long range W, his little rockets. So try to stay pretty far back when you're not last hitting. And when you do have to go up to last hit, obviously other than just using your spells, your E and your Q to last hit from far away, try to maybe run up in a straight line until the point where you think Heimer's going to throw a spell out, and then completely just sidestep it. That can definitely help you to minimize the amount of damage you take poke-wise. But anyways, once you hit level 6, try to maybe he recalls before you, and then you can clear out his towers or his turrets, and then hopefully he doesn't have a bunch of turrets when you try and jump him. If he does, you can definitely outplay it. The thing is, if you jump into a Heimer with 3 turrets with your ultimate and then you land your E, if Heimer misses his E, his little stun grenade, he won't do a bunch of damage with all of his turrets lasering you. But if he does hit you with the E, you're gonna die, because those turrets are gonna take you to like 50% health, and then he's gonna ult you in some way with his ult W or something, and then you're gonna, simply put, I recommend waiting until level 6 and then having a jungler gank you. Just deal with the pain. I've played this matchup a million times. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Wait till level 6 and then have a jungler gank. That is my seminar on Heimerdinger. Next up, we have Illaoi. Now guys, this matchup is actually really easy to survive. In fact, you can kill Illaoi, but you always have to be worried about the presence, the pressure that his E would give him, that little soul grabbing thing. Basically, if you stay behind minions, you should be fine to survive the lane, but at the same time, if you try to overextend to kill him, he can very easily just soul grab you and then start beating down your soul and healing up a ton with all of his spells, or her spells rather. So keeping that in mind, it's going to be pretty hard to kill Illaoi until level 6, but once you hit level 6, you need to look for an opportunity to make Illaoi miss the soul grab, and then at that point, the champion is pretty easy to kill. And also keep in mind, this champion is a very, very, very slow and very immobile champion. So if you catch the Illaoi out just a little bit, so say like not even at your tower in top lane, but like a little bit more towards your tower than the midpoint, all you have to do is ult the Illaoi, and then like maybe she misses her soul grab, and then you jump onto the Illaoi, and then she's gonna ult, and then you literally have to wait 5 seconds, wait a second, maybe just let her do her thing with her ult, because it's a very stationary thing, and she kind of just like gets caught with her pants down. And then after that point, then you can just finish her off and kill her, because she has no ult, she has no soul grab, she is essentially a worthless champion. Next up, we have Irelia. Now this champion is something else. Just know that she can only kill you by cheesing you, and the way she cheeses you is by getting her 4 stacks of her passive, or the way she kills you or cheeses you is by getting a backline minion, your caster minion low, throwing her stun, and then dashing to the low HP caster minion, resetting her Q, and then hitting you with the stun because she's now in range after she dashed onto the minion, and then just beating you down. Other than that, Irelia isn't a hard matchup for Akali at all, because Akali can just shroud everything. Every kind of aggression Irelia has, Akali can just reply by pressing shroud. If Irelia doesn't get a E mark onto you, if she can't reset her Q onto you, then you just shroud when she jumps you, and then she has no way of escaping. She can't Q back to the minion wave, she can't really do anything. So with that in mind, it is a very, very easy matchup for you, as long as you are careful to not get hit by her 4 stacks of her passive level 1. Most times Irelia will go like Corrupting Potion, Conqueror, then they'll go for the first 3 minions, they'll Q all of them, and then by the 4th Q, it'll be onto you, and then they'll just try beating you down and taking out half your health there. Just be careful about that. But yeah, other than that, it's a pretty easy matchup. Next up, we have Jarvan the Fourth. If you're going against Jarvan, I don't really know what elo you're playing in. I don't really see Jarvan top ever, but we'll just ignore that part. Basically, Jarvan is going to hit you with medium or mediocre poke throughout the lane. If you have 3 potions, you should be fine until level 6. But if he does try to EQ onto you, it can do a lot of damage because he'll follow it up with some auto attacks, especially his passive proc auto does a lot of damage. Keeping that in mind, I think just if you think he's the type of player to EQ, and you're going to have to try and like gauge this lane out, because some Jarvans just try and use their Q and E to poke, some just go all in, they're super aggressive Jarvan laners. You have to kind of gauge it out. If he's the type to EQ, if he's the type to jump on you every time, then you can easily react by pressing your E. He's going to miss his knock-up, his entire combo, and then he is going to get combo down by you. Other than that, I mean, say he does EQ you, you can Q and then Shroud instantly, get your passive proc onto him, and then Q again, and then go back into your Shroud. I don't think this is a lane you can lose, to be completely honest with you, but just be careful about getting cheesed by his EQ burst. Next up, we have Jax. Jax is going to look to jump onto you and stun you throughout the lane, but whenever he jumps you, all you have to do is press your Shroud and wait until his stun circle that gives him infinite dodges is done. Past that point, he's completely defenseless, and he has no escape either because he uses escape to jump onto you, in which case you will be able to absolutely decimate him by throwing out Qs and passive procs. And you can also, if your E is up and he jumps onto you, you can respond to him jumping on you by pressing E, and then the second his stun expires, if he's already using it, then you can fly into the lane and beat him in that way. Overall, Jax is extremely easy for Akali to abuse with her Shroud, and post 6 it doesn't get any better for Jax. Akali should absolutely be able to destroy the Jax. All you have to do is be careful about his stun, but in reality you can easily just bait it out. If he uses a stun, you can use your ult to wait it out. If he uses a stun, you can use your E. If he uses his stun, you can use your Shroud. Next up, we have Jace. Jace is going to look to poke you out in the first few levels, and you have no choice but to let him. Try to use your spells to last it from as far as possible, and try to avoid his Q poke by staying behind minions. If he tries to run up to you and auto attack you, and he threatens to go into human form and Q you and beat you down, simply put, there's not much you can do about it in the first few levels. However, starting around level 3, level 4, once the minion waves are equaled out, assuming you're healthy and you haven't made any early game mistakes, like level 1 through 3 mistakes, you should be able to actually start beating him by playing aggressive. If he starts to jump in at level 3 or 4 with even minion waves, then you can reply by pressing E and then jump into him. And then the thing is, Jace does not have a real ultimate, so enjoy destroying him at level 6. Next up, we have Karma. Karma is going to try to poke you out, and unfortunately her W makes it so Akali cannot go invisible with Shroud. So that means you have to be very careful. You cannot use your E against Karma unless Karma uses her W first and you're dashing out of her W's tether range. Other than that, she's going to try and poke you out. If you try and jump on her, she's going to shield herself and then run away. You're not going to be able to kill Karma in lane unless she is overextended heavily, so keep that in mind. Just try to farm. She doesn't do that much damage with poke, so it should be relatively easy to survive the lane. Next up, we have Karthus. He's very easy to kill. If you ever go against Karthus, you should be very happy. If you ever go against a Karthus, which you probably won't, but you must be watching. Anyways, if you're going against a Karthus, just avoid taking damage from his Q. What you don't want to do is run away from your minions. You want to kind of zigzag throughout your minions, because if he does hit you with a Q and it's isolated damage, meaning you're the only one that takes the damage, it's going to hurt you a lot. I'm talking like unbelievable amounts for the early game levels, so keep that in mind. But other than that, I mean, he is extremely slow. He's immobile. At level 4, you should be able to E backwards, Q him, and then go into Shroud and then start beating him down with all the combos we've talked about. Level 6 essentially is a free win for you, because if Karthus doesn't go back before then to get a Ruby Crystal or get tanky or something, you can really easily just 100-0 combo Karthus. out of thin air and kill him within like 5 seconds, just refer back to the level 6 combos we talked about in the combo guide and the early and mid-game sections. Next up, we have Kassadin. This champion is also extremely easy for Akali to beat because the way it works is level 1, he might try to Q you and get that shield up. You kind of just let him Q you. I found the most success by doing that. Just let him Q you the first time, wait for the shield to go away, and then you go up to Q him, and then force the passive proc. If he takes the damage from passive proc, that's great. If not, he's running back, he's staying back, he's not going to get the first 3 minions. So keep that in mind. You can really start building an early CS lead from the beginning. And the thing is, he's Kassadin in lane, so that means that he's not going to do anything to help a jungler kill you. So as long as you have like at least your Shroud or your E up, you can pretty much escape every single gank while against a Kassadin while playing extremely aggressive to zone him out. Other than that, I mean, sometimes I like to throw my E out just to add poke onto the guy, because simply put, I mean, Kassadin he's yours to abuse. Make sure you win the game though. A little side tip, make sure you win the game before level 16. Try to take every dragon, just follow the guide as best as you can, force fight, dive bot lane, everything you can, because level 16 Kassadin, you lose. You lose. Moving on, we have Katarina. Now this is a pretty fun skill-based matchup, and I'm going to tell you what you can do to completely beat Katarina. When she tries to throw a Q out and the dagger goes onto the floor, the only thing Katarina is ever looking for to win the lane is to hit you by shumpoing or jumping onto that dagger on the floor and then comboing you from there. Her throwing her Q onto you does almost no damage. Her Eing you and then autoing you is suicide because she loses her escape, and then you can literally just combo her down and beat her up. So really the only way she wins this lane is by trying to throw a Q next to you and then jumping onto that dagger and making you take that crazy AoE damage and then comboing you from there. Just be very careful about not being in Katarina's range of jumping onto those daggers and getting a shumpo reset. Other than that, it's very easy to win the lane. Level 6 is also a cool thing because if she ever tries to ult on you, as long as you have your E or your ultimate ready to go, I kind of prefer ulting, because here's the thing, if Katarina jumps you in the middle of the mid lane and then starts ulting, you press your ult because you know it's go time probably, unless she just instantly flies away. But you want to ult immediately, because not only does it get you out of her ultimate range, but you're going to start the cooldown, the timer, to be able to use your R2, and then it's a very, it's a good mobility to have. That R2 not being targeted is very useful against a Katarina who's flying all over the place, and not to mention the amount of damage it does. Other than that, yeah, it's a pretty simple matchup. Just avoid her bouncing shurikens. Next up, we have Kayle. This is a very easy, straightforward matchup, but I will give a few pieces of advice for you. Try to play as aggressive as possible, because simply put, she's not a real champion until level 11. If she tries to hit you with a Q, if she tries to hit you with E's, know that they have very high cooldowns. She doesn't even have ranged auto attacks. So you are simply going to abuse her. She has no escape. It's just play as aggressive as possible, because the trade-off for Kayle, this is something that you should keep in mind. The trade-off of playing Kayle is you lose your early game in exchange for a fantastic late game. So with that in mind, just play as aggressive, abuse the early gameless Kayle. Next up, we have Kennen. If you're ever going against a Kennen, you need to stay behind minions. If he tries to run up to auto attack you, you need to run back, and then if he tries to get behind your minions to try and threaten you, then you want to use your E onto him, and then you can take it from there, jump him, and then if he's behind your minions, he's overextended, then you can fly in with the second part of your E and start queuing him and autoing him. If he tries to auto you, he's actually threatening you, he's trying to bully you, but in reality, if you jump him, with the help of him being behind your minions are going to do a lot of damage to him in the lane. He's a squishy champion. Don't be too bullied by Kennen, but at the same time, if you find yourself getting owned, just submit, wait until level 6, try to get what you can, and then try again level 6 when you know you can absolutely decimate the guy. Next up, we have the Kled versus Akali matchup. In my opinion, Kled is the hardest counter to Akali in League of Legends. because his Q reveals you in Shroud. You don't have the range with your E to get out of his Q range. He can jump onto you. You can't escape Kled's wrath. What I highly recommend in this matchup is don't push the waters, don't test the limits, because simply put, if Kled is even close to the same skill level as you, he is going to destroy you. Just try your best, hopefully, and usually they do. They'll shove the wave into you, try to get a freeze, and then wait for a gank. He's not immune to ganks, so that's nice. But if you try to be cocky in this matchup, and I know most Akali mains or Akali players are cocky, you're just going to find yourself feeding very hard. This comes from experience, by the way. Next up, we have LeBlanc. While I don't have too much experience with this matchup, honestly, I usually ban LeBlanc. I can say that you do want to, simply put, just do not try and fight her. The thing is, her E reveals you in Shroud. If she hits you with her E, the chain, you cannot be invisible against her. If you try to dash out of it, her E chain is too much range. If you try to Q her and then auto her, she is going to reply with much more damage. She is a very, very strong lane bully and is the definition of what beats Akali in lane. In my suggestion, just stay back and farm until level 6 the best you can, and then take it from there. Hopefully you don't hit the wrong clone when you are trying to kill her at 6, but you'll be able to pop her passive once you're level 6. She's very squishy. Once she plays aggressive and uses her W, it's go time. You jump the person with no escape. Next up, we have Lissandra. This champion is going to try to extend her Q poke by hitting a minion, one of your minions, and then hitting you after it extends the range of it. What you want to do with that in mind is stay away from your minion wave. Do not let her create a line between her, your wave, and you. You need to make it so she's not able to directly extend the range of her Q and hit you and the wave at the same time. Other than that, she'll never be able to hit you because the range just isn't that much unless she pops her Q in the first place. So with that in mind, that is going to be the main way she pokes you out in the lane. Past that, depending on if she goes Aftershock or Electrocute, you have a few different ways you can play the lane. It's kind of hard to jump Lissandra with Aftershock because she'll just absorb all of your burst and then back up. And in general, Lissandra pushes the wave naturally with her Q very, very quickly. So you can try and set up a freeze. You can definitely try and just work under your tower, get minions. And then I would recommend asking your jungler to gank for you, because that is pretty much all you can do against Lissandra. She's got that crazy E to escape. You're not going to be able to kill her until level 6. But even then, if she goes for a Rod of Ages build with Catalyst, she's going to become really tanky. And I just don't see it unless you catch her outside of the tower at Dragon or the enemy jungle, something like that. Those are going to be your best bets. But in terms of killing her in lane, even at level 6, it's a stretch, but she can't really bully you out of a lane unless you simply position terribly. Next up, we have Lucian. Now, this is another case of an AD carry invading Akali's personal space, which means that you have to just simply stay back. You have to submit until level 6. Try to use your Q, your W, and your E to assist you in getting as many minions as possible. There is no secret answer to beating Lucian pre-6 as Akali. You can E onto the Lucian if he dashes onto you, and then you can try and trade then. But in reality, he's just going to follow that up with 2 autos. He's going to Q you in the face and then do 2 more autos. He does way too much damage, and I would highly advise against playing aggressive until 6. But once you hit 6, it should be pretty easy to kill him, but not as easy as other AD carries. He is pretty mobile. You're going to struggle to hit your E and your Q sometimes. But with that in mind, once he uses his dash, I think that's a good indicator to go in. If he's overextended under your tower and you're level 6, then you can absolutely kill him, because once you ult him, he's going to dash out. If he doesn't, here's the bottom line of what I'm trying to say. If you jump him at level 6 and he's under your tower, you have a lot of room to work with. Wait until he dashes to use your E. Other than that, you should still be able to destroy him by hitting with Qs and passive procs and then using your Shroud to help you to your advantage. But if you miss your E, you're going to dash backwards the wrong direction, and then Lucian is going to get away, and then your ult's going to be down. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Just don't use your E until Lucian uses his E at level 6, and then pre-6, just don't play aggressive at all. Next up, we have Lux. Lux is going to attempt to poke you out, but she's also very squishy. I recommend you play very safe until level 3 when you have 1 point in each spell. Assuming you haven't lost more than like maybe 15-20% of your health, then you can definitely try and run at her, sidestep her Q, maybe go into your shroud once you get close to her. Maybe you run up to her, get in range to Q her, and then you go into shroud, use your passive to give you a little burst of movement speed, your shroud to give you burst of movement speed, then try to hit her with the passive proc, and then Q, E on the way out. If Lux plays safe, you can't kill her. I always complain about this on my stream, that Lux is just such a sad champion that people always just throw E's at from their turret and then they farm until late game. If that's the case, you know, so be it. You can't kill all Luxes if they overextend. I would just wait until 6, maybe try to dive her at that point, see if you can kill her then. If she's still playing extremely passive, because most Lux players don't have an aggressive bone in their body, I would just look to roam, look to invade, and then outplay her there. Eventually, she does have to leave her turret, and against the matchups like that, like Lux type champions where they just hide under their tower and farm, or depending on the player, you can do that with any champion, you just have to look to give them reasons to have to leave their base. Or their tower rather. Next up, we have Malphite. If you're going against a Malphite, what you're going to want to do is try to just play aggressive from every last stage of the game. Malphite does well with armor, and Akali is magic damage for the most part other than her E. Regardless, she is able to outtrade Malphite at every last level of the game. But also with that in mind, you do not want to get too aggressive, because sometimes Malphite seems very easy to abuse, and then you kind of just get so aggressive that you forget that you can get ganked by a jungler. Malphite's Q is pretty oppressive, and he does have a fair bit of burst with his W and his E, not to mention. It's very good to help set up the jungler for a gank with that Q slow as well. So just play aggressive, but do not extend all of your abilities top lane, because top is a very long lane. You might end up naturally pushing the wave out and being overextended. You always want to have your shroud and your E available if you're going against Malphite and you're at his tower, because his Q is too much for just one spell to help you out with. If he Qs you and you E, you're still going to be slowed after you dash, and then the jungler and him are going to run you down. Keep those things in mind, and then other than that, I mean, level 6, it's a crapshoot of who wins. You should be able to destroy him if he's overextended. There's nothing he'll be able to do. With that in mind, he sets up for jungle ganks very well, so keep that in mind. As long as you have a ward, you can absolutely destroy Malphite at level 6, and there's nothing you can do about it. He just doesn't do enough damage to compete with you. Next up, we have Malzahar. This champion is something that a lot of people ask me questions about. Like, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure why everyone struggles with Malzahar, because simply put, his little cloud, his little cloud of damage, I call it the AIDS cloud, it's very well projected where he's going to be throwing it out and where it's going to land to next. As long as you're not next to a 2 HP minion and you don't get hit by that, that's most of his poke. If he summons his voidlings, you can clear them out with a single auto attack or a Q, and then you're just completely shutting out his ability to shove waves in. Other than that, I mean, once you're level 3 or 4, Malzahar is a pretty short-ranged mage, so you can hit your E onto him or your Q, and then you can literally run him down. I think the problem is most people play Akali versus Malzahar, and they take a lot of damage in the first 3 levels before the wave resets for that level 3.5, level 4 jump. So just keep that in mind. Do not play. Don't get caught out against a Malzahar, but you don't have to be too worried about him, especially when you have your Shroud. He has to try and predict that little AoE gate spell. I think it's his E. He's trying to predict where you are, and his Voidlings can't hurt you when you're in your Shroud. It's a very straightforward lane to win in Akali's favor, surprisingly. Next up, we have Maokai. This champion is extremely tanky and can do a lot more damage than you'd think with his Q. I don't really recommend playing too aggressive until level 4 and 5 because I think he actually takes better trades and he gets pretty big heals. And not to mention, it's kind of his lane to win yet again, unless you want to practice playing aggressive. If you can bait out his Q, or if he uses the Q to farm, that is your go. That's your signal to go in for a lot of damage, go in for a trade. You can wither him down. What the heck is this? You can wither him down, but I do think that it's going to be completely based off of when and where he makes mistakes using his cooldowns. But other than that, I mean, do not get baited out by him throwing his W at the same time you Q. A lot of times Akali players will try and Q the Maokai, but the Q and the W, his W and Akali's Q have a pretty similar range. So a lot of time you'll end up just trying to Q a Maokai while he's in the middle of his W, and it just completely fizzles out. You don't get to hit Maokai when he's in his W, and then you won't get the passive proc. You'll lose a lot of energy. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you just have to let him hit you with the W if you want to trade back. And I know that sounds weird, but it's just the best way to do it. Next up, we have Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is going to try and poke you out in the lane because, simply put, it doesn't cost him any mana and he can just infinitely spam his spells. With that in mind, he doesn't do too much damage in the first few levels as long as you're not isolated by his Q. So if you stay on top of minions, that's one way to minimize the damage you take, but you can also just simply put stay back and then try and sidestep, maybe try and juke out, or pretend like you're going to go in for a last hit and then he'll try and throw his Q in response and then you back up. And then once his Q is down, you can play aggressive during the duration it takes for him to get his Q back up. Other than that, I mean, it's a extremely straightforward matchup because Mordekaiser's abilities are the opposite of outplay worthy. You know what every spell does if you've ever played Mordekaiser before even once. And then yeah, once you hit level 6, he is as good as dead. You need to do that classic RE combo that we went over in the combo guide and the early and mid game sections. And then at that point, you just destroy him. Like, simply put, he's got no mobility. He's pretty squishy, and not even his shield can help him. Not even his shield can help him. I will say though, his shield lasts for a pretty long time, so don't try and wait it out. Maybe just try and shred right through it. Next up, we have Morgana. This matchup is essentially going to be impossible for you to win until level 6, but you can just farm the lane for free. She's not going to really poke you out too hard. Her W tickles, if anything. It's just used to clear the wave really quickly. She might try to throw some Qs when you're under tower, and you can't really do anything about it. Trying to gank a Morgana is almost impossible as well because 1 point in Spell Shield will make her immune to all forms of crowd control from your jungler, and your Q slow. So just really try to farm up until 6. Once you hit level 6, you can easily, if you can dodge her Q, then you can ult on top of her, and then if she tries to ult in response, you can just press E, leave the tether range, and then fly right back into her and absolutely decimate her. Next up, we have Nasus. If you're going against a Nasus, it's very important that you put the pressure at 100% at every stage of the game. Other than just asking a jungler to gank non-stop, you want to be trying to poke him out as much as possible with Qs and autos and Es and autos, and every last combo we talked about in the combos guide, the the combo guide, the early game, mid game. The only thing you have to be worried about is his slow, and if he does slow you, you can instantly E out or go into your shroud and then run away and wait it out. But he can't really ever trade with you. He is always going to try and just last hit and stack up his Q, so you have infinite range to try and poke him out. And he's probably going to go teleport, he's probably going to go for a Adorn shield, so it won't do that much, but eventually it will do a substantial amount of damage, especially once you're level 4 and you have 2 points in your Q, 1 point in your E. A lot of Nasuses don't take Akali seriously because they're pretty tanky, his passive heals him, and with that to your advantage, if you ever build up a big wave by being aggressive and then it crashes under his tower, and then eventually it re-pushes towards yours, if he's ever not completely under his tower, you can run him down level 4 and beyond. Nothing changes at level 6, in fact it just gets easier. There's really no stage in the game in which you can't kill Nasus until 3 items, but you know, this is a matchups guide for laning, not the entire game. Next up, we have Neeko. Try your best to avoid taking hits from her E. Her E is going to absolutely decimate you because it's going to follow up with you getting hit by 2 or 3 pulses of her Q. So it's imperative, it's extremely important that you do not get hit by her E. What you can do to avoid that is stay extremely far away. But here's the thing though, I think this is important to mention. It's okay if you get hit by 1 EQ combo because you have 100% health for a reason, right? In reality, her EQ around level 2, level 3, level 4, it's only going to do like 25-30% of your health. As long as you don't keep taking those, like, you don't want to miss every single minion because your potions aren't just there to kill the enemy, they're there to help you. So you'll inevitably take some EQs if you're trying to get minions, and you do want to farm up for level 6. Just try not to get too low, and if you're running low on potions pretty early on, then start readjusting how you're playing the lane, start sacrificing more minions in the name of not having to recall. Because here's the thing, here's the bottom line. You want to get as many minions as you can for level 6 without having to recall before you hit 6. Because if she pokes you out to the point where you have to recall early, that's how you know you've done a bad job. If you can get as many minions as possible and say you have to recall at half health around the time you're hitting 6, but at least you got a lot of minions and you're out of potions and you did a decent job, that's good enough, because now you're level 6, you're coming back into this Neeko versus Akali matchup, you can destroy her. Her W may be a little tricky, it's a 50-50 a lot of the time because Neekos are so tricky. There's only a few of them and they know what they're doing for the most part. Very unpopular champion, but just try your best to, I guess, just get the right one, because when she presses W and they both run in different directions, good luck. Next up we have Olaf. Okay, alright, next up guys, we have Olaf. You shouldn't really be going against Olaf too often. I was struggling because a lot of these are just junglers. But you shouldn't be going against Olaf too much, but when you do, you can absolutely play aggressive, because the thing is, Olaf has to pick up his axe to try and do damage, and if he throws his axe towards you, usually you're going to be somewhere next to or behind your minion wave, which means that when he runs up to pick up his axe, you can easily hit him with an E. You can passive proc, fly in again, and then instantly go into Shroud. All the combos we always talk about. The Olaf matchup isn't too complicated, but it is the same thing as going against a Darius, in that if you get caught out by an Olaf Q, that slow is pretty strong. If you get caught out by that halfway into the lane without your E or your W, he is going to run you down, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to have to flash, and if you don't have flash, you're going to die, and even if you do have flash, you might still die. So just be very careful to not let him best you when you do not have cooldowns up. Other than that, if you can hit level 6 just by passively playing the lane out, it's a guaranteed kill, because Olaf literally has nothing he can do to survive your gank. He's not tanky, he's got no escape. It's a genuine free kill. So if you want to take the free win, maybe just play till 6 and then kill him then. But I highly recommend you practice playing aggressive, because Olaf is a good matchup to do it in. It's a skill-based matchup that's in Akali's favor. Next up, we have Orianna. Now, she is going to try to poke you out, but she doesn't really do too much damage poking. Just don't run face first into her. In reality, there's nothing you can do to really win the lane until level 6, unless she lets you trade her at level 4. Usually Orianna's won't let you get in range to Q them. And if you try to even run towards the Orianna, she's going to hit you with her slow and chunk you out for a lot of damage. I would recommend waiting until 6, because at the end of the day, once you're on top of her, once you're able to get on top of her with your ult, then she has no escape. She's an immobile champion. You can absolutely take advantage of her at that point. Moving on, we have Ornn. Ornn is going to be a champion that deceivingly does a lot of damage, like it seems like most tanks do. A lot of damage that you wouldn't expect coming from a tank. The way you can play against an Ornn is to avoid getting hit by his knockup. He tries to summon that little pillar from the ground and then he dashes into it. That is a pretty wide AoE spread radius. If he ever does try to hit you with that combo, you need to E out of it. And honestly, if he's doing it with no enemy minions around, just to dash into you, you can actually use that as an opportunity to not only use your E to avoid his little dash, his two-part combo, you can hit him with the E and then run him down from there. And that is going to help you as well, because if he has Aftershock and he doesn't get that damage, he doesn't get the Aftershock proc off of stunning you, then you can do a fair amount of burst before he autos you to stun you. I'm not too familiar with the Ornn matchup, to be honest, but I do know you will destroy him at 6. So if nothing else, if all else fails, you find yourself taking a lot of damage, then just play safe until 6, and then you can easily kill him. Next up, we have Pantheon. This is one of the very few matchups I might actually go for a Doran shield into, but you don't even need it, to be honest. It's just a matter of you have to survive until 6. You cannot play aggressive against Pantheon. He does way too much damage. If you jump into him, he's going to W you, do a bunch of bursts, and then Q you on the way out. It's actually quite brutal. This is one of the few matchups I would say don't even bother practicing playing aggressive, because you're going to need all the health, the potions you have to just survive until 6. Yeah, this is the only matchup I would say, other than Kled and LeBlanc, don't even bother playing aggressive. Even LeBlanc I might play aggressive, but just Pantheon, stay safe till 6. Once you hit 6, his little one-sided invincibility shield won't help him, because you're dashing all over him in different directions in a circle, all over the place, and then you can absolutely decimate him from that point. Next up, we have Poppy. Poppy is going to be a champion that is also surprisingly hard to kill, because she is just very tanky. But the thing about Poppy is, if you can block her passive by running over the little ball that gives her a shield before she does, or if she does go for the ball, just back up and let the shield expire. If you do that and you're never next to a wall to let her stun you, you can definitely take slightly better trades than her. Her Q auto and her Q passive procs still allow her to do good damage. So you gotta keep that in mind, but you can definitely win the lane if you're aware of Poppy's shield and you're aware of getting knocked into walls by Poppy. Other than that, her W makes it very annoying to try and escape ganks from, or try and jump her, because it completely just negates out any form of like dash that's within the circle. So keep that in mind. You should still, if you're both level 6, it's going to be a little bit difficult, because she's probably going to completely negate out your ult. So it's going to be a little hard to kill her, to be honest. But you should still try, and try to wither her down at level 5, because if she's half health when you jump her, it's going to be a lot harder for her to escape the gank, if nothing else, or for her to escape your wrath, if nothing else. Next up, we have Qiyana. Qiyana is going to be a champion that you want to play aggressive in, because it is a 50-50 skill matchup. I would say one of the closest matchups there is. If she tries to Q you, then you Q her and then you auto her. Akali wins level 1, and then level 2 she also wins with when Akali E's. If she tries to E, the bottom line is, if Qiyana ever tries to press E, you follow it up with your own E, and you completely counter it out. The only thing she could really do to beat you in lane is to try and throw out a bunch of long-range poke, because her empowered Qs can hurt after a while, but it does cost a lot of her mana. And overall, another strategy you can do in this matchup is, because Qiyana's last hits, her Qs, or empowered Qs, a lot of it is just a pretty massive AoE. You can try and make her push the wave into you and then just set up a freeze, and then she loses the wave. I like doing that because Qiyana isn't mobile. She has a little W she can dash backwards with, but unless there's a target between her and her tower, she can't really use her E to escape. So you can definitely zone off Qiyana as a champion pretty easily. Alright guys, next up we have Quinn. This champion isn't as difficult as you may think. Realistically, the only way he can try and harass you is by throwing his Q out, that big bird skill shot, which has a decent amount of ranged AoE explosion range. But to avoid that, you just need to dodge it, stay behind minions a little bit. You can't be right behind minions because it'll still hurt you, but stay a little bit further behind them. You can also try and use your E to jump away from it. Past that, all he has left is to jump you with his E, and at that point you should be able to follow up with a combo of your own if he gets in close range. Obviously, you do not want to play aggressive towards him until around level 3 or 4 when the minion waves are evened out and you have 1 point in each spell. Take the lane pretty slowly. If you mess up against a Quinn, he will abuse you heavily, but anything past level 6 is an absolute stomp for Akali. Because his ult is meant to roam around, your ult is meant to destroy a single target that is squishy. He is that target, so enjoy the free kills at level 6. Next up we have Renekton. This champion is going to completely depend on the Renekton player as to how difficult it's going to be. You need to keep track of what abilities he has at what levels. If he starts with E at level 1, that means that he may go for a stun at level 2 and he may go for a level 2 cheese, dash through the minions and stun you and do a ton of damage. However, most Renektons play it safe. They start with Q at level 1 and therefore you know he can't do any major damage until he hits level 3, so you can actually play aggressive during the first few levels. All in all, this matchup it's really hard to give tips towards, but if I had to give tips, just keep track of what spells he has and what point. If he does try to dash into you, you can use your E as a response, and then when he tries to dash up to you, you actually hit him with the mark. He's not able to hit his stun. If he does try to get into range of stun and you're not able to dash through, or maybe you just would rather use your Shroud, the second he gets in range to stun you, press your Shroud and then run up or down a little bit somewhere he's not, and then hit him with the Q, and then that way you'll be able to hurt him while his stun is active, but he's not going to be able to get in range to stun you. Past that, level 6 Akali does win as well. Just have to try to be full health and have a little bit of room to work with. Maybe freeze the wave under your tower or close to it. Just give yourself some room to work with. Renekton will fall, especially if you go back before 6 and get a little bit of extra damage. Next up, we have Rengar. This champion is extremely cheesy to go against, and all you really need to know for this matchup is stay away from brushes. If you know how Rengar works, then you know that he gets a little bit, well, 1 out of 5 Fury stacks for every single time he jumps from a brush to a minion. And at that point, he can actually jump on you and then Q you and do an empowered Q, and it's a crazy amount of burst. And he has a lot of cheesy kill potential, but as long as you stay away from the brushes, sometimes you're gonna have to miss minions because of it. But once you hit level 4 and level 6, those are your best chances to kill Rengar. Simply put, he is just way too strong, levels 1 through 3, and you have no chance during those levels. You have such no chance that you need to give up farm. Next up, we have Riven. Riven is going to be pretty difficult for Akali if Riven knows what she's doing. Luckily, if you're watching this, you're probably not Diamond or better, and Rivens have no clue what they're doing. So, with that in mind, just practice playing aggressive in the lane. Every time she tries to jump up to you, or even run up to you, hit her with the Q, and if she dashes forward, at that point you can consider using your Shroud or your E, and then just trade accordingly. We went over all the combos in the early and mid game sections of the guide and the combos guide. Just hit her with all your best combos, and she can't really dash too far with each individual spell. So it'll be it won't be easy for you to hit your E, but it won't be too hard either. Highly recommend probably just saving your E for when she runs out of dashes. That would be the best way to do it. But then level 6 and beyond, if you're full health and she's full health, you can definitely win a 1v1, but this is going to be completely based off of who weakens the other person before the level 6 engage first. If you're weakened a little bit and she's not, she will win that fight because, simply put, she does a lot of damage too. Akali's not the only champion that does a lot of damage at level 6. Best of luck with this one. Next up, we have Rumble. This one's pretty straightforward. If he tries to flamethrower you during the first few levels of the lane, levels 1 through 3, just back up and to try to avoid taking his poke. If he tries to throw his harpoons at you, stay behind minions, and if he tries to run past those, then you can try to fight him at level 3, level 4, and beyond, but simply put, he will out-trade you during the first few levels of the lane. Past that, around level 4, you can start playing aggressive towards him, start fighting back. And the whole point of me saying fight back is it's under the assumption that you don't lose a lot of your health during the first 3 levels of the game. So don't get caught out going for a few minions and losing half of your health just over a few minions in the first few levels. Just sacrifice a few until you hit level 4, then you can start winning the lane and even go for that kill. Level 6 it gets even easier. Although Rumble's ult is big and scary, Akali executes champions and it does a lot more than Rumble's ult in a 1 versus 1. Next up we have Ryze. This champion is extremely painful to deal with in the first few levels as well. You need to definitely be careful about him spreading his E and then throwing out his Q and doing 120 damage to you at level 2. It is very oppressive and the poke can add up very quickly, so just stay away from your minions. He's going to try his best to poke you out, but in reality, what usually ends up happening is Ryze just shoves the wave really quickly, ends up being under your tower trying to poke you, and then he has no escape and he ends up getting ganked. Be sure to be actively asking your jungler for a gank versus Ryze, because the way he plays out is he naturally pushes the wave very quickly, and that leads to you being under your tower, leads to him being overextended, and what you can do is actually E backwards towards him, hit him with the tip of your Q, slow him out, and then just kill him with your jungler. If nothing, he uses flash, and then the lane becomes a free farm until you hit level 6, then his flash will still be down, and you can kill him at that point. Next up, we have Set. This is a matchup you need to be so incredibly careful in because he does the cheesiest amount of damage against Akali, and there's not a lot you can do, especially in the first few levels. Level 2, if you don't have Shroud, you will get hit by his E, he'll auto you twice while you're slowed by his E, and then he'll double Q you and you'll lose half of your health if not more. With that in mind, level 1, just try to farm it out. You can throw your Q out. If he tries to Q you can back up and he has nothing else to follow with. Level 2, be very careful about his cheese. You can go for a Shroud level 2 just for this matchup if you want. You don't need it though. I would probably recommend going E level 2 and just throwing out your E to help you last hit. Once you hit level 4, then you can start playing aggressive again, but be very careful if you get caught even at level 4 without your Shroud or your E. Halfway into the lane, he will zone you off the entire time your cooldowns are down, or worse, he will either kill you or make you have to recall. Level 6 is a lot easier though versus Set. He does have that shield, but Akali has a million different ways to get rid of, dodge, or whatever the crazy damage his W provides. Okay, so you should be able to pretty much kill Set at 6 guaranteed because he doesn't have an escape. And you should be able to outplay him with your Shroud if you use all the combos we mentioned in the early and mid game section of the video and the combo guide. Next up we have Shen. Shen is very easy to abuse in lane because, simply put, he only wins a few matchups, so just try to play as aggressive as possible. Be wary of him taunting you into a minion wave. That's about the only way he can win 1 versus 1. He will try to block out your passive proc, sometimes 2, but even if he does that, you can just press your E and fly right back out. It's a very straightforward matchup at level 6. You win and he doesn't. Also, if he tries to ult, a little side fun tip for you. If he tries to ult to bot lane, if you hit him with your E, you can actually take the free ride all the way to bot lane. It's something that you should probably actively be looking for once you hit 6, because you never know when he might try to ult bot lane in the middle of just being laning. Next up, we have Singed. Honestly, there's not too much you can do against him perma-pushing you as Akali, but you can break even with him in farm until around level 4. If he's playing the lane and he's not proxying, then you can definitely play aggressive at 4, just because he has that W that makes it so you can't jump. Doesn't mean you can't just go into your Shroud and avoid getting flung. He's not tanky, so while he is running into you and being aggressive, it's almost like he's faking you out, he's bullying you. You can play aggressive back, and the same thing goes for level 6. Try to weaken Singed if you're laning against him around level 5, and then start using your potions, because if he's around 70-80% health by the time you hit 6, you guys both hit 6, it's going to make it almost guaranteed you kill him unless you seriously mess up in the lane. Next up we have Sion. Sion is very straightforward in how you lane against him. He's going to try and charge up Qs, and you need to not be in the Qs when they're fully charged. Other than that, he's going to throw random E pokes out there, and if you try and trade him, he's going to press W. You can easily win the lane if you take it very slowly, especially when he uses his spells. They have pretty high cooldowns, so you can look to take small leads here and there by zoning him off of minions when he has no cooldowns, or if he doesn't respect you while he has no cooldowns, then you can weaken him out and eventually maybe kill him in the lane. Those are the two options though. Level 6, it is also very easy to kill Sion. You just have to jump right in. There's nothing you can do about it. He might try to ult away, but you have to do your best to try and block him, block his ult directly so he can't just fly right out. Next up we have Swain. Swain is going to be a champion that is going to try and look to poke you in the first few levels, but in reality he doesn't really do too much damage in the early game with his poke. You can definitely just take the poke, try not to get autoed over and over again, but even his auto attacks don't do that much. So what I would say for the Swain lane is to just be careful. You can't really run up to him and try and hurt him, because if you run up to him, he's going to hit you with an E, W, and a Q combo, and a Q to the face can do a lot of damage. I would recommend just playing the lane safe and straightforward until level 4, and then maybe look to go aggressive if he uses his cooldowns before then. But once you hit level 4, then you can start bumping up the pressure, the aggression, try to start weakening him, take even trades around level 4, and then look to kill him once you hit level 6. Next up we have Sylas. Sylas is a champion that is very good against Akali in almost every way possible. He can trade with you, he can out-sustain you, in close fights he kills you with his healing, and he steals your ultimate and becomes a better version of you in a lot of ways. Just look to be aggressive versus Sylas because he's not unkillable, but at the same time know that he has the lead, the upper hand in the lane. If you're not able to act and react very quickly in fights where he dashes to the right of your minions, so you need to jump up left to get to have your minions block his E. It's a very, very fast-paced fight. You'll blink. You can't blink in this matchup. Otherwise, you're gonna end up losing half of your health versus Sylas, and he might end up killing you. Keep that in mind. I would recommend playing aggressive though, because you can still kill him if you are the better player, and it's all about getting to be the better player. Next up, we have Syndra. A lot of people ask me, how do I beat Syndra? She just pokes me out all the time. Well, simply put, you just have to try and fake out last hitting minions to wear down her Q mana. She's going to keep trying to throw Qs when you go up to last hit. So with that in mind, all you have to do is run up, pretend to last hit a minion, and then back up right before you would be getting in range to auto attack, because that's exactly when Syndra's going to try and throw her Q. Another thing you can do is stay out of range of her spells until it's time to go for last hits. She's not always going to be looking to last hit you. If she does run up past your minions, then you can actually fight her back because your minions will help you. You can throw your E if she is past her minions and then connect your E. She's never really going to get past her wave. She's just going to try and last hit you and deny you off of the melee minions for the most part. But with that in mind, around level 3 and 4, you can use your Shroud to block out her stun or dodge her stun or W, and then you can actually kill her pretty easily because she's immobile, very squishy, and her cooldowns are kind of high. I don't know, I've actually found pretty easy success playing aggressive towards Syndra at level 3, and I would recommend you guys practice playing aggressive in this matchup as well. Next up we have Talon. Talon is going to look to Q you very close range, and he's also going to look to hit you with 2 parts of his W and then Q you to proc his passive. Basically, all you have to do in this lane is make it so you don't get hit by both parts of his W, so stay back a little bit. If he tries to throw out his W to poke you when you try and throw out your Q, just don't get hit by both parts, because if he flies in towards you with his Q at level 2, he is going to activate his passive, which is almost all of his kill potential in the first 5 levels of the game. But past that, you should be able to play aggressive towards him. Whenever his W is down, whenever his Q is down, you should be able to out-trade him. And even when he has those abilities up, if you play the lane right and you can wither him down until that point you're using your own potions to stay healthy, there's a certain point where he'll just be like 20% less health than you because you're out-trading him. to the point where he might go aggressive, but you'll have the lead. He jumps you, and then you press your E, and then you jump in and do all the combos and mechanics we talked about in the early and mid game stages of the guide, as well as the combo guide. You just practice everything you've learned, and you should be able to actually kill him pretty easily. He's pretty squishy. You go longsword, and you have a lot of damage in the early game. Next up, we have Teemo. Teemo is a lot easier to go against than you'd think. It's as simple as going against any other ranged champion that tries to harass you. You just have to respect the fact that he wins the first few levels of the game. Try to last hit with your spells during the first few levels. And then the thing about Teemo is whenever he runs past his minions to try and throw harass at you, you can use your E and fly in. Sure, in the middle of your E too, when you're flying towards him, he's going to blind you, but it's not an issue because you can just go into your shroud, wait the blind out, and then beat the crap out of him, honestly. I have no better words for it. He's very squishy, he's immobile, he's got such a low health bar. You should be able to kill him relatively easy. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. He's going to try and blind you. You need to wait it out in shroud, respect the first few levels, and that's it. That's it for this lane. Next up, we have Trundle. Trundle is going to be pretty straightforward in the matchup. The only thing is he might try to pillar you while you have no shroud up or no E up and try and all in you at that point. If you can avoid that, you can avoid literally every potential of him killing you. The lane is very straightforward in that he usually starts Q level 1, you start Q, you can start taking good trades on him early game. Level 2, nothing really changes. You go E, he goes W, or he goes pillar. When your E is down, if you try to E him before he shows a second spell, then just respect the fact that he might have pillar. But without his W, he won't be able to really catch up to you either way. He might, but he'll take a lot of minion damage, and he might get like 1 or 2 autos off. And then yeah, level 6, you just jump him and absolutely just decimate him. Very easy. And that is it for that matchup. Next up, we have Tryndamere. This is a very, very easy matchup, but you have to be careful to not get cheesed by his Fury crit mechanic. If he has a full Fury bar and he spins on top of you and tries to get a bunch of autos off, you need to be ready. You need to always have your E ready or your Shroud ready to try and outplay him. The only way Tryndamere wins is if he spins on top of you and starts autoing you when your cooldowns are down. So whenever you do use your cooldowns, like your E and your W, stay very safe, out of his range to spin on top of you and start critting the crap out of you, because that is really, really the only way you can lose this matchup. At level 6, you can absolutely decimate him as well. You might, depending on the situation, you might not be able to kill him through his ultimate, but he'll have to recall. But you do have Ignite to use at the very last second as well, which can definitely help. If you time the Ignite right, at level 6, you should be able to get rid of most of his healing and kill him after his ult expires. Next up, we have Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate is a champion that has enough poke and enough range with his spells and wave clear that you are almost never going to be able to kill him early in the lane, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. You should only try though when he doesn't have his W ready, his blue, red, yellow card. Because at that point, if he does have his red card up or his blue card, he's gonna throw a card at you and then back up, and you're gonna keep getting chunked lower and lower, and he's gonna keep regenerating mana with his blue card right after. So keeping that in mind, I would only really play the lane aggressive and maybe try to zone off some minions, maybe try to go in for a trade when his W is down. Past that, you can follow him if he ever ults to bot lane. You can actually hit him with an E and then fly with him to bot lane, but that's pretty hard to do because you have to find him in the middle of him getting ready to ult. But yeah, other than that, I mean, you absolutely decimate him at level 6. At level 6, he doesn't really get to play the lane anymore if you don't shove the wave in. If you want to freeze the wave at 6 and force him to overextend or just throw constant max range Qs to farm, there's no bad answer, right? Because you're going to be getting all the minions and he's going to be forced to just take what he can with his Q. But usually they're not monk, they're not Shaolin monks, they're not patient enough to just stay really far back and throw Qs. They will overextend, and at which point you can E backwards and then ult on top of them and just decimate the level 6 Twisted Fate, because they're always squishy unless they go back and get a Ruby Crystal, but it's still doable at that point. Next up, we have Udyr. I never really go against Udyr top, so I'll only give advice on what I think I would be the best. Probably just don't play aggressive at level 2 unless your Shroud or E are up. I would not waste your E or W on trying to harass the Udyr, because if he is level 2 and you don't have your defensive spell, your Shroud or your E, he is going to run you down with his bear form and then tiger form and pretty much take out your entire health bar within 5 seconds. So just be very careful about that. But with that said, Akali thrives on destroying immobile champions. So as long as you space properly, you don't get caught in the bear form, the bear stun, and then hit by his tiger form, crazy damage, it's a very easy lane. I guarantee you could win this lane extremely easily if you don't get hit by a stun. Just always have a solution to a stun, whether it be spacing far away enough and then shrouding if he gets too close, or dashing backwards, something like that. Level 6, he has no ultimate, it gets even easier. Next up, we have Urgot. Urgot is going to try his best to poke you out with his little bomb, his nonsense, and then essentially what he's going to do is he's going to try and wither you out with his spells until you're about 80-70% health, and then he's going to try and jump on you and hit you with his machine gun. You just have to be very careful about dodging his flip, because he's going to charge into you and try and flip you, and if he flips you, it's going to lead into a ton of damage. You're not always going to be able to dodge out his poke because it's a pretty fast explosion, and it's got a pretty decent range. It's all about just dodging the flip, to be honest. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward lane. You don't really do enough damage. Urgot's too tanky to really take him on pre-6. But once you hit level 6, you can definitely kill him. Assuming he doesn't have a lead, assuming you're both equal health, you can definitely kill him at that point. So what I would recommend is just staying safe and not playing aggressive until then. Just farm it out. Obviously, if he tries to go in to trade you past your minions, then you do have to trade back, because simply put, there's no reason for you to let him zone you off. You can definitely trade back. It's just, that's his decision to make if he wants to overextend and take a bunch of minion damage. Next up, we have Vayne. Very straightforward matchup. She is going to try and bully you levels 1 and 2. You have to let her do that. Level 3 though, she's a very short range champion. You can definitely use your Q into your Shroud and just try and hit her with a bunch of passive rocks and Qs, and then fly out and then wait for your cooldowns to come back up. She might try and zone you off while your cooldowns are down, but that's just a part of the lane. Vayne versus Akali is actually very easy to win because of her short range, letting Akali be able to hit her Qs onto Vayne pretty easily. Not to mention, level 6, it just gets easier. If you go against a Vayne top, as long as you don't mess up, she can't run you down. The only way you can mess up this lane is by not having your Shroud available, and she just runs you down. Because, what are you going to do melee versus range without an escape or a defensive tool? And then that's pretty much it. Next up, we have Veigar. This champion is very straightforward in how you can beat him. All you have to do is stay back when he tries to Q last hit minions to stack up his passive, because he's going to try and hit last hit minions with his Q to build up AP from his passive. You just don't want to be caught in the middle of it, because his Q can hit 2 things instead of just 1. He might try to last hit a minion and then have it go through the minion and hit you, which will, just poke you out and also give him AP. But past that, level 1, that's all he's going to do. Level 2, he's going to probably go W and just continue to shove the wave in. Usually Veigars tend to just shove the wave in on the 2nd or 3rd wave, just let it build up and then crash into your tower. Once it hits level 3 or 4, because he's a pretty short range champion, you can easily force him to use a stun. You can jump onto him and try and run up to him and slow him. Usually if you E backwards and threaten to Q him, he's going to be forced to use a stun, which will give you a few seconds to zone him off of minions, which will give you a small lead in that way. But if he doesn't, you can also just completely destroy Veigar. Sometimes you can throw your Shroud out in the middle of his stun circle, and then he's going to be forced to try and predict where to throw his W, where to throw his Q. And as long as you know what you're doing as Akali, you basically always want to throw your Shroud out, and then the second you throw your Shroud and go invisible, you run just completely to the right or to the left. So they never expect it, honestly, and then they always miss their skill shots. But past that, you just want to let him do his thing, let him keep shoving you in until level 6, and then at that point, usually in these matchups, Veigar versus Akali, they tend to be under tower when Akali hits 6, and then you just jump him, and even if he has a stun thing, there's nothing you can do about it. You can wait it out with your E, because usually you can just jump him with ult the second you hit 6, and then him with the E. He might stun you, but you can just take the stun and then fly in with your E2 and just pop him. But overall, you can take it one step at a time depending on the game. Next up, we have Vel'Koz. He is a very difficult champion to go against if you're against a Vel'Koz main, because they are going to try their best to poke you out in the lane. It is definitely what Vel'Koz succeeds in, other than killing you from a mile away at level 6. But the thing is, Vel'Koz is very squishy, and he does have some form of natural wave shoving, just because his spells that he tries to poke you with will end up hitting minions as well. So you'll end up being under your tower soon enough. You'll have the opportunity to farm safely under your tower for the most part. He might try to poke you out, but at that point you should definitely ask for a jungler gank. But jungler ganks aside, just try and farm your best under your tower. And then around level 4, he is a very immobile and very, very squishy champion. So look for an opportunity to kill him. Maybe if he goes a little bit too close to you, you can E backwards and then Q him, hit the slow, and just run him down like any other matchup you'd ever have. And hopefully you can dodge out his E, because if you don't, you're going to take a lot of damage. But I mean, his E is a very slow skill shot. As long as you're very active in the lane, maybe you drink some coffee so you got that quick reaction time, you should be able to beat him out. You should be able to never really get hit by his E and play aggressive. But also another thing is level 6, don't underestimate his damage. If he hits you with a Q and you're at like 50% health or 40% health, he can literally wipe out your entire health bar with his ult, proccing his passive over and over again. He does deceivingly a lot of damage at level 6, so just be careful about that. Next up, we have Viktor. Viktor is almost very hilariously easy to go against because of he just seems like he would do so much with his poke. In reality, he just does not do that much. Obviously, you can't run up to him and start auto-attacking him because he will Q-auto you, he'll laser you, but really he doesn't do that much damage. He's very immobile, he's very squishy. This is a matchup that you should be able to win at level 4 every single time. Not to mention, once you hit level 6, it's almost impossible for him to stun you with his stun circle gravity thingy, because you have to be in his circle to get stunned for like over a second, I believe. Akali dashes all over the place. You're never going to be in that stun circle for more than a second. So keeping all that stuff in mind, it's a very, very easy matchup for Akali to abuse. You just have to take the initiative to be aggressive and don't get chunked out for no reason. Don't go for one minion and end up taking 25% of your health with his Q auto E. Just pick your fights correctly and you'll always win this matchup. Next up, we have Vladimir. Vladimir is very interesting as well because I think a lot of people don't think you can play aggressive towards Vlad, when in reality, he doesn't heal as much as you'd think, and in fact, his empowered Q is really the only thing that he can use to trade back with you. If he goes Dark Seal, refillable, and he goes for Ignite, for example, it's actually really easy to kill Vlad at level 3 and 4 once you have 1 point in each spell. You literally just have to be careful about his empowered Q, that little fury bar that builds up to 100 and he just does a ton of burst then. Other than that, I mean, you should be able to win every single trade and start weakening him and withering him down. You've got 3 potions, you're playing Akali versus a squishy mage, keep that in mind and you can destroy him. Nothing changes post 6, he's very easy to beat. You want to abuse Vladimir as much as possible from levels 3 until around level 14, 15, 16 when he starts getting to late game and he becomes really, really powerful. Next up we have Wukong. The other 2 champions don't matter. Next up we have Wukong. So Wukong is recently, as I'm making this video, becoming popular and strong, and I think what I would say against Wukong is you need to always save your E for when he dashes onto you. But other than that, you can definitely play aggressive at level 2 and 3. He doesn't really do that much damage anymore with his spells, so you can actually trade him. He's pretty squishy for a bruiser, I would say. just practice playing aggressive in this lane. Your Shroud should be used for when he tries to dash on you as well if your E is not up or you're not able to use your E. But other than that, I mean, you out-trade him. Your combo versus his combo should do more starting around level 4. The only thing I would say is be careful about wasting all of your spells on his clone. Always keep in mind the fact that he could use his W, because you don't want to end up using your Q, your E, or your passive proc on Wukong's clone, because that will absolutely make the difference. It can make the difference between him winning that trade or you winning that trade, or even him killing you versus you killing him. I don't have too much advice on this matchup because I've rarely played it, but I do think that is some solid advice for sure. Next up, we have Xerath. People always struggle with this matchup, but in reality, it is as simple as this. Xerath either has to choose between hitting you with his spells, his empowered or his long-range Q, or shoving the wave in. Usually Xerath will choose to Q the wave, or he'll try to Q the wave and you at the same time. The way you can avoid getting hit at the same time as the wave would be to not let him make a line between you, him, and the minions, because if he can hit you and the minions at the same time, that's a big win for him. He wants to shove you in, he wants to poke you under tower, and you just can't let him. You have to always be staying away from on the sideline of the minions, stay to the side of the minions, zigzag up, back and forth, and then switch up your patterns. Hopefully he misses, but even if you don't miss his skill shots, if he just hits you with Q, it doesn't really do that much damage. The problem is if you get hit by them constantly, non-stop, no chance to regenerate your health. The problem is if you get hit by his stun and his W. Realistically, you should never be in range or able to get hit by a stun unless you're under tower. If you do get hit by that, you're doing something very wrong, I would say. Past that, once you hit level 6 or level 4 even, you can definitely try and bait out his stun by running towards him and then sidestepping his stun, and then you can continue the aggression towards him. You can kill Xerath if you outplay them at level 4, level 5, or you can straight up just ult them at level 6, and it's relatively easy to kill them, but you do have to be careful about the stun and their barrier. Usually they have barrier. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward matchup, I would say. Not as difficult as you might think. Next up, we have Yasuo. A lot of people struggle with this matchup, when in reality, it's extremely easy for Akali to win. Level 1, you can go break even with Yasuo, but he's definitely going to shove the wave harder, which is going to lead into the next point, which is level 2 Yasuo will absolutely decimate you if he hits level 2 while you're level 1. He's going to end up dashing through minions and then dashing onto you and hitting you with a flurry of auto attacks and Qs, and you don't want that to happen because that's going to slow down your ability to win the lane. You have to use more potions. You can still win the lane if that happens, but the point is, level 1, it's break even, Yasuo versus Akali. Level 2, let him just take that. Let him have the level 2. Level 3 is when you can start playing aggressive with each spell. If he dashes in, or even if he doesn't, you can basically you can Q him and try and auto him. If he dashes onto you, then you can just press E onto him instantly as a response, and then overall you just absolutely can play aggressive the entire lane, usually because he has to dash into the wave and you can just bully champions that are melee range. It turns out to be a very easy matchup. The only problem is he can catch you out if you don't have your defensive spells. He can dash onto you and just beat you up. Sometimes if you're not good at dodging spells, he'll just keep hitting you with tornadoes and withering you down that way. But other than those two things, if you're careful, if you know how to dodge skill shots, then it is a very straightforward win for Akali. Next up, guys, we have Yorick. Yorick is a very straightforward champion because he really doesn't have any tricky spells to be careful about. Although if he does try to throw out his ghouls at you, you do need to shroud it or you'll take a ton of damage. But usually you shouldn't be getting hit by that ghoul skill shot anyways. You should be zigzagging throughout the lane and abusing your little movement speed boosts from your shroud and your passive. But yeah, if you do get hit by the ghouls, then try to run away or go invisible to completely just counter out his ghouls. Other than that, I mean, you just have to play aggressive throughout the lane. Starting at level 3, levels 1 and 2 you can play aggressive, but it's going to be a lot less rewarding because I think usually it's going to be break-even trades or in his favor. So I would probably just wait until level 3, level 4, wither him down from that point on until you hit level 6. You both have around the same amount of wave clear. Usually the lane turns out to being about in the midpoint. And then you can just jump him level 6, and then that should get you the kill. Next up, we have Zed. This matchup is particularly easy for a lot of reasons, but the most important one, guys, is that Zed's poke is usually going to be his Q, right? Unless he goes crazy and W-E's you, it's going to be coming from his Q, and his Q only does noticeable damage to the first target it hits. That means that if you're behind a minion, it's going to do reduced damage, and it's just not even going to, it's going to tickle you, and that means that his only tool to poke or trade back, for the most part, is now on cooldown, which means that you can zone him off of several minions while it has to come back up. Or if, even better, he uses it to last hit minions the first wave from the get-go. From level 1, you can play aggressive and zone him off the back 3 caster minions while he tries to Q the first 3. It's just so easy to abuse Zed in lane as Akali that you should absolutely be doing it. Level 2, nothing changes. He might go E, he might go W, doesn't really matter. If he goes E, then, he can't jump onto you and try and hit you with long-range Qs. If he goes W, then while that's down, you can absolutely just jump him with your E. Throughout the entire thing, it's very straightforward, easy to beat him. And then once he gets level 6, once you're both level 6, you can use your Shroud to make him probably miss all of his spells when he ults you. And then if nothing else, he won't be able to auto you to increase the amount of damage his ult does. So there's a lot of tools that you can use to beat Zed. I also recommend going Zhonya's second item and completely making his existence pointless, because one little item counters Zed completely. Next up, we have Ziggs. For this matchup, just be extremely careful. Do not get hit by too many bombs. He's going to shove the wave naturally, and then he'll be under your tower, so you can ask for a gank for sure. But in general, he's just going to try and shove the wave and then look to go roam or something like that, or try and take your tower. This is going to be a very annoying matchup, but once you hit level 6, it's very easy to kill him. He is exceptionally squishy, and you can exceptionally farm his soul. You just have to be careful until level 4, level 6. You can definitely play aggressive once you're level 4, but in reality, he's probably going to just he's going to deny your attempts to jump onto him by throwing his W and then continue poking you. Next up, we have Zilean. Zilean is a very straightforward champion in that you know when and where his bombs are going to explode, the range on them, unless you've never played against him before, but we're going to go over the fundamentals. So Zilean pops his bomb only instantly if he throws one bomb on top of another. Then the first bomb will explode instantly, and it actually can do a decent amount of damage. But the thing is, no matter what, that is Zilean's only aggressive ability. He will not be able to poke you out in the lane, so I think it's kind of funny when Zilean's even try to be aggressive in lane. Other than that, if he uses his Q, or if he misses, even if he doesn't, wait until level 3, wait until level 4, and start playing aggressive towards Zilean, because he is probably the squishiest champion in League of Legends, honestly, and very easy to kill. At level 6, he does get that ultimate, so you'll have to kill him 2 rounds in a row. But once you get a Gunblade, if you can't kill him before then, he simply can't survive your damage output. Even if he ults the first time, when you uses up your ult, you just do way too much damage. You can one-shot Zilean over and over again. And finally, guys, we have Zoe. Zoe is a very difficult champion for Akali to go against, but if you stay behind your minions, she can't hit you with her Q. You just need to also avoid getting hit by her sleep bubble by just knowing the range on it. It extends the range. The range of it extends if she throws it through walls and towers and stuff like that. So don't get cheesed by that as well. Just be very careful about getting hit by her long range Q, because that's going to poke you out. If you get hit by a single sleep bubble, you're in major trouble. So when she does inevitably shove the wave in, and she's going to try and hit you with a sleep bubble under your tower, you need to be very careful to make sure you use your E, make sure you're staying so far back that you don't even get some minions, because if you get hit by a sleep bubble and then a max range Q, that's half your health, and it's not worth 2 or 3 minions. It's just not. And yeah, that is pretty much it. Guys, after many full days and restless nights, this guide is done, and all I ask is that you, number 1, like the video, Number 2, please subscribe. Number 3, donate me your life savings on Twitch. Donate links over there. Number 4, subscribe to me. Number 5, give me your firstborn. And number 6, have a good day. Peace. Also, I know a lot of you guys are going to use this guide and start climbing. Let me know what rank you started at when you started playing Akali, and in a few months from now, when you hit a higher rank, come back and comment down below what rank you got to. I love actually hearing about that.